Welcome to Ian Cinema, your destination for endless entertainment and unforgettable movie moments. Discover exciting films, inspiring stories, and cinematic journeys across every genre. Whether you love action, drama, thrillers, or timeless favorites, there's always something waiting for you here. Sit back, enjoy the experience, and let Ian Cinema bring the magic of movies to your screen. Black Swan is a 2010 American psychological horror thriller directed by Darren Aronofsky. The screenplay was written by Mark Heyman, John J. McLaughlin, and Andreas Hines, based on a story by Hines. The film stars Natalie Portman, Vincent Cassel, Mila Kunis, Barbara Hershey, and Winona Ryder. The story centers on the New York City Ballet production of Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake, led by the company's artistic director, Thomas Leroy. Vincent Cassel, the lead role, demands a ballerina capable of portraying both the pure, delicate white swan and the seductive, mysterious black swan. Nina Sayers, Natalie Portman, a highly dedicated and technically gifted dancer, is the ideal choice for the white swan. However, her free-spirited rival, Lily, Mila Kunis, naturally embodies the passion and confidence needed for the black swan. As Nina competes for the coveted role, the intense pressure to achieve perfection begins to consume her. Her growing obsession blurs the line between reality and illusion, causing her fragile mental state to unravel as she descends into paranoia and madness. Darren Aronofsky developed the film's concept by combining his fascination with the performance of Swan Lake and an unfinished screenplay about understudies. He was also inspired by the idea of being haunted by a double, a theme closely tied to the folklore of doppelganger. Another major influence was Fyodor Dostoevsky's novel The Double. Aronofsky also viewed Black Swan as a companion piece to his 2008 film The Wrestler, as both explore the physical and psychological sacrifices demanded by artistic excellence. Aronofsky and Natalie Portman first discussed the project in 2000. After a brief period of development with Universal Pictures, the film was ultimately produced by Fox Searchlight Pictures in New York City during late 2009. To prepare for their roles, Portman and Kunis underwent several months of intensive ballet training before filming began. Black Swan premiered at the 67th Venice International Film Festival on September 1, 2010. It received a limited theatrical release in the United States on December 3, 2010. Before expanding to theaters nationwide later that month, Black Swan premiered on December 17, 2010, and received widespread critical acclaim. Critics praised Darren Aronofsky's masterful direction, along with the outstanding performances of Natalie Portman, Mila Kunis, and Barbara Hershey. The film also became a remarkable box office success, earning $332.1 million worldwide against a modest $13 million budget. At the 83rd Academy Awards, Black Swan received 5 nominations, including Best Picture and Best Director for Darren Aronofsky. Natalie Portman won the Academy Award for Best Actress for her unforgettable performance. The film also earned 4 nominations at the 68th Golden Globe Awards, including Best Motion Picture a Drama and Best Director, with Portman taking home the award for Best Actress in a Motion Picture a Drama. In 2021, The New Yorker recognized Portman's portrayal of Nina Sayers as one of the greatest film performances of the 21st century. The story follows Nina Sayers, a talented but emotionally fragile dancer with the New York City Ballet. She lives with her overprotective mother, Erica, a former ballerina who now dedicates her life to Nina's career. As the company prepares to open its season with Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake, artistic director Thomas Leroy forces the aging prima ballerina Beth McIntyre into retirement and begins searching for a dancer capable of performing both the innocent white swan, Odette, and the seductive black swan, Odile. Nina auditions and delivers a flawless performance as the graceful white swan, but struggles to capture the passion and sensuality required for the black swan, believing she lacks emotional freedom. Thomas initially rejects her, determined to prove herself, Nina confronts him the following day. During the encounter, Thomas unexpectedly kisses her, prompting Nina to bite him before fleeing his office. Despite the incident, she is later stunned to discover she has been cast in the lead role. At a gala celebrating the new season, an intoxicated Beth publicly accuses Nina of earning the role by sleeping with Thomas. The next day, Nina learns that Beth had been seriously injured after being struck by a car. Thomas believes Beth deliberately attempted suicide. Visiting Beth in the hospital, Nina is devastated to see her badly damaged legs, realizing that Beth's dancing career is over forever. As rehearsals continue, Thomas encourages Nina to observe Lily, a free-spirited newcomer whose natural confidence and sensuality perfectly suit the Black Swan. Lily also bears a striking physical resemblance to Nina, increasing her insecurity. Meanwhile, Nina begins experiencing disturbing hallucinations and notices mysterious scratches appearing on her back. One evening, despite Erica's objections, Nina accepts Lily's invitation to go out. Lily secretly slips ecstasy into Nina's drink, leading to an uninhibited night of partying, dancing, and flirtation. Nina believes she and Lily eventually return to her apartment and have sex. However, she wakes up alone the next morning, confused and late for rehearsal. At rehearsal, Nina is shocked to see Lily practicing the role of the Black Swan. When she confronts Lily about the previous night, Lily laughs and insists that nothing happened, suggesting Nina imagined the entire experience. Nina becomes increasingly convinced that Lily is trying to replace her, especially after discovering Thomas has named Lily as her understudy. As opening night approaches, Nina's hallucinations become more terrifying. She suffers increasingly severe psychological breakdowns, believing she is physically transforming into the Black Swan. Concerned for her daughter's mental state, Erica desperately tries to prevent Nina from performing. After a violent confrontation with her mother and another unsettling encounter with Beth, Nina rushes to the theater, where she discovers Lily preparing to perform as Odette in her absence. Nina persuades Thomas to let her reclaim the role. During the second act, Nina becomes distracted by another hallucination and loses her balance during a lift, causing her partner to drop her. Furious, Thomas criticizes her performance. Returning to her dressing room, Nina finds Lily preparing to perform as Odile. Suddenly, Lily appears to transform into an exact duplicate of Nina. The two engage in a violent struggle, smashing a mirror in the process. Nina grabs a shard of broken glass and stabs her double, believing she has killed Lily. She hides the body before returning to the stage. Freed from her fears, Nina delivers a breathtaking performance as the Black Swan. In her mind, she completely transforms into the dark, seductive creature, with black feathers seemingly growing from her body. The audience erupts in applause, and Thomas embraces her. Overcome with emotion, Nina unexpectedly kisses him. Back in her dressing room, Nina changes into the White Swan costume for the ballet's final act. To her horror, Lily suddenly enters the room, congratulating her on an incredible performance. Nina realizes the mirror remains shattered, but there is no sign of a body or evidence of any fight. Looking down, she discovers the shard of glass lodged in her own abdomen, realizing she had stabbed herself rather than Lily. Despite her fatal injury, Nina returns to the stage and performs the ballet's emotional finale while blood slowly spreads across her white costume. As the performance concludes, she leaps from the stage onto a hidden mattress, recreating Odette's tragic death. The audience rises in a thunderous standing ovation while Thomas, Lily, and the rest of the company gather backstage to celebrate her triumph. Thomas soon notices Nina bleeding heavily and rushes to her side, asking, "What happened?" Smiling peacefully, Nina softly replies, "I felt it. Perfect. I was perfect." As the screen fades to white, her pursuit of artistic perfection reaches its heartbreaking conclusion. Director Darren Aronofsky first became interested in ballet after his sister studied dance at New York City's High School of Performing Arts. The idea for Black Swan originated when he revisited an earlier screenplay titled The Understudy, which explored the psychological terror of being haunted by a mysterious double. Aronofsky described the script as blending elements of All About Eve, 1950, Roman Polanski's The Tenant, 1976, and Fyodor Dostoevsky's novella The Double. After watching numerous productions of Swan Lake, Aronofsky became fascinated by the contrast between the innocent white swan and the seductive black swan. Recognizing how perfectly the ballet's duality matched the screenplay's themes, while researching the film, he immersed himself in the world of professional ballet. Although many dancers were skeptical of Hollywood's portrayal of their profession, both active and retired performers generously shared their experiences. Aronofsky also spent time backstage at performances by the Bolshoi Ballet in New York's Lincoln Center to better understand the demanding lifestyle of elite dancers. Aronofsky has often described Black Swan as a companion piece to his earlier film, The Wrestler. He originally envisioned a single story centered on a romance between a wrestler and a ballerina, but eventually decided the two worlds deserved separate films. Reflecting on the connection, he explained that wrestling is often viewed as one of the lowest forms of art, while ballet is considered one of the highest. Yet, despite those differences, he was fascinated by how both performers dedicate their bodies entirely to expressing emotion and pursuing perfection. Black Swan drew inspiration from several classic psychological thrillers. Natalie Portman compared its unsettling atmosphere to Roman Polanski's Rosemary's Baby, 1968, while director Darren Aronofsky cited Repulsion, 1965, and The Tenant, 1976, as major influences on the film's psychological style. Vincent Cassel also noted similarities between Black Swan and the early works of both Roman Polanski and David Cronenberg. Aronofsky first discussed the idea of making a ballet film with Natalie Portman in 2000, and she immediately expressed interest in portraying a ballet dancer. Portman explained that she was searching for more mature roles, saying that young actresses often become trapped in a cycle of playing cute characters. She also recommended her close friend Mila Kunis for the role of Lily, believing she would be a perfect fit. Kunis described Lily as the opposite of Nina. While Nina is highly disciplined and technically gifted, Lily is more spontaneous and naturally passionate. Although she lacks Nina's precision, her raw emotion and confidence make her a compelling dancer. Vincent Cassel played Thomas Leroy, the demanding artistic director of the ballet company. He based the character partly on legendary choreographer George Balanchine, co-founder of the New York City Ballet, describing him as a perfectionist who often used sexuality as a way to influence and motivate his dancers to prepare for their physically demanding roles. Portman and Kunis trained for 6 months before filming began. Their goal was to develop the lean physique, strength, and muscle tone of professional ballet dancers. Portman trained for approximately 5 hours every day, combining ballet practice with cross-training and swimming. As filming approached, she intensified her choreography rehearsals. Kunis followed an equally demanding routine, spending 5 hours a day, 7 days a week, doing cardio, Pilates, and ballet while maintaining a strict 1,200 calorie diet. She lost around 20 pounds, dropping from her usual weight of about 117 pounds to roughly 97 pounds. Kunis explained that although she had taken ballet lessons as a child, performing at a professional level was an entirely different experience. She noted that ballet requires complete physical conditioning, and it is impossible to fake the movements or posture expected of a trained dancer. Former American Ballet Theatre, ABT, ballet mistress Georgina Parkinson coached the cast throughout production. ABT soloists Sarah Lane and Maria Ricchetto served as dance doubles for Portman and Kunis, respectively. Dancer Kimberly Prose also doubled for Portman and praised her dedication, explaining that Portman trained for months and performed most of the upper body movements herself. Sarah Lane handled many of the technically demanding ballet sequences, including the famous Fatilde copyright test, while Prose completed additional dance shots after Lane's limited availability ended. Members of the Pennsylvania Ballet were also cast as the Corps de Ballet, providing an authentic professional backdrop for the performances. Supporting cast members included Christina Anna, Toby Hemingway, Sebastian Stan, and Janet Montgomery. Aronofsky and Portman first explored the ballet concept shortly after the release of Requiem for a Dream, 2000, long before a screenplay existed. During those early conversations, Aronofsky described a story involving a romantic relationship between two rival ballet dancers. Portman found the concept fascinating because it explored the artist's ego, narcissism, self-obsession, and self-loathing. Because the project spent nearly a decade in development, Portman felt that the long wait allowed the story to mature naturally before production finally began. She and Kunis later admitted that filming the intimate scenes between Mila and Lily was emotionally challenging since they were close friends. However, their trust and friendship ultimately made those scenes easier to perform. Portman also joked that the filmmakers believed the intimate scene would have helped attract audiences who might not otherwise be interested in a ballet film. Both actresses revealed that Aronofsky occasionally tried to increase the tension between them by comparing their performances and encouraging friendly competition. Although they recognized his strategy, they remained close friends throughout filming. The screenplay evolved from an earlier script titled The Understudy, written by Andres Hines. Aronofsky first encountered the project while editing Requiem for a Dream and described it as all about Eve with a double, set in the off-Broadway theater world. After completing The Fountain, 2006, Aronofsky and producer Mike Medavoy asked screenwriter John McLaughlin to rewrite the script. McLaughlin combined Aronofsky's idea of Swan Lake with a ballet setting, eventually transforming the project into Black Swan. In January 2007, Universal Pictures fast-tracked development after Aronofsky presented a detailed outline. However, the project stalled again until after he completed The Wrestler, 2008. Aronofsky then worked with Mark Heyman, who developed the screenplay into a version that was ready for production. By June 2009, Universal placed the project into turnaround, attracting interest from several studios, particularly because Natalie Portman had committed to star. The film was developed by Protozoa Pictures and Overnight Productions, with the latter providing financing. Mila Kunis officially joined the cast in July 2009. Fox Searchlight Pictures distributed the film and provided a production budget of approximately $12 million. Principal photography began in New York City towards the end of 2009 using Super 16mm cameras. Several scenes were filmed at the Performing Arts Center of the State University of New York at Purchase. Aronofsky intentionally chose a muted color palette and grainy visual style, similar to the look of The Wrestler. He explained that Super 16 cameras were lightweight, highly mobile, and more affordable than 35mm equipment. More importantly, he wanted the film to have a raw, documentary-like realism rather than a polished appearance. Just as he had brought the camera directly into the wrestling ring in The Wrestler, Aronofsky wanted the camera to move on to the ballet stage and into rehearsal rooms. His goal was for the camera itself to feel as though it were dancing alongside the performers. Although he initially worried that handheld cinematography might reduce the suspense in a psychological thriller, he ultimately embraced the approach. Cinematographer Matthew Libatique shot the film entirely on 16mm film. The soundtrack combines Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky's music from Swan Lake with an original score by Clint Mansell, marking his fifth consecutive collaboration with Aronofsky. Mansell reimagined Tchaikovsky's compositions with modern, darker interpretations that reflected the film's psychological intensity. The soundtrack also features violin performances by Tim Fain, while the nightclub sequence includes electronic music by the Chemical Brothers. However, that track was omitted from the official soundtrack album. Because the score relied heavily on Tchaikovsky's original compositions, it was ruled ineligible for the 2010 Academy Award for Best Original Score. Black Swan premiered as the opening film of the 67th Venice International Film Festival on September 1, 2010. The screening received an extended standing ovation, which Variety described as one of the strongest opening night receptions in recent Venice history. Festival director Marco Mawanforthler selected Black Swan over the American, starring George Clooney, explaining that it was simply a better choice for the festival's opening night. The film also screened in competition at Venice, becoming Aronofsky's third consecutive film to premiere there, following The Fountain and The Wrestler. A special sneak preview was held at the Telluride Film Festival on September 5, 2010, followed by a gala presentation at the Toronto International Film Festival later that month. During October 2010, Black Swan was shown at the New Orleans Film Festival, Austin Film Festival, and BFI London Film Festival. In November, it screened at FIFest in Los Angeles, the Denver Film Festival, and the Camerimage Film Festival in Poland. The film's United Kingdom release was moved forward from February 11 to January 21, 2011. According to The Independent, Black Swan was one of the most highly anticipated films of 2010. The newspaper compared it to the classic 1948 ballet film The Red Shoes, noting that both films portray dancers consumed by their relentless pursuit of artistic perfection. To celebrate its 15th anniversary, Black Swan returned to theaters in a newly remastered IMAX edition from August 21-24, 2025. The film was originally released on DVD and Blu-ray in Region 1/Regina on March 29, 2011. The Region 2/IMB version was released on May 16, 2011. Black Swan had a limited release in select cities in North America on December 3, 2010 in 18 theaters and was a surprise box office success. The film took in a total of $415,822 on its opening day, averaging $23,11 per theater. By the end of its opening weekend, it grossed $1,443,098,012 per theater. The per-location average was the second highest for the opening weekend of 2010 behind The King's Speech. The film is Fox Searchlight Pictures' highest per-average gross ever, and it ranks 21st on the all-time list. On its second weekend, the film expanded to 90 theaters and grossed $3.3 million, ranking it as the sixth film at the box office. In its third weekend, it expanded again to 959 theaters and grossed $8,383,479. The film went on to gross over $16 million in the United States and over $329 million worldwide. Black Swan received positive reviews from critics upon release with praise toward Aronofsky's direction and the performances of Portman, Kunis, and Hershey. Review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes gives the film an approval rating of 85% based on 318 reviews and an average rating of 8.20. The website's critical consensus reads, "A bracingly intense, passionate, and a wildly melodramatic, Black Swan glides on Darren Aronofsky's bold direction and a brave tour-de-force performance from Natalie Portman at Metacritic, which assigns a weighted average score to reviews. The film received an average score of 79 out of 100 based on 42 critics, indicating generally a positive reviews. In September 2010, Entertainment Weekly reported that based on reviews from the film screening at the Venice Film Festival, Black Swan is already set to be one of the year's most love it or hate it films. Leonard Maldina on his blog Movie Crazy admitted that he couldn't stand the film despite highly appraising Portman's performance. Reuters described the early response to the film as largely positive, with Portman's performance being highly praised. The Sydney Morning Herald reported that the film divided critics. Some found the theatricality maddening, but most declared themselves swept away. Kurt Loder of Reason called the film wonderfully creepy and wrote that it's not entirely satisfying, but it's infused with the director's usual creative brio and it has a great dark gleaming look. Mike Goodridge from A Screen Daily called Black Swan alternately disturbing and exhilarating and described the film as a hybrid of The Turning Point 1977 and Polanski's films Repulsion 1965 and A Rosemary's Baby 1968. Goodridge described Portman's performance. She is captivating us in She captures the confusion of a repressed young woman thrown into a world of danger and temptation with a frightening veracity. The critic also commended Cassel, Kunis and Hershey in their supporting roles, particularly comparing Hershey to Ruth Gordon and the role of the desperate jealous mother. Goodridge praised Latikia's cinematography with the dance scenes and the psychologically unnerving scenes. It's a mesmerizing psychological idea that builds to gloriously theatrical a tragic finale as Nana attempts to deliver the perfect performance. Kirk Honeycutt of The Hollywood Reporter gave the film a mixed review. He wrote, "A Black Swan is an instant guilty pleasure, a gorgeously shot, visually a complex film whose badness is what's so good about it. You might howl at the sheer audacity of mixing mental illness with the body-fatiguing mind-numbing rigors of ballet. But its lurid imagery and a Hellcat competition between two rival dancers is pretty irresistible." Onion commended Milip's sumptuous choreography and libatic darting a weaving camera work. The critic said the thematic mashup. Aronofsky never succeeds in wedding genre elements to the world of ballet. White Swan, Black Swan dynamics almost work, but the horror movie nonsense drags everything down the rabbit hole of preposterousness. Similarly, in a piece for the Huffington Post, Rob Kirkpatrick praised Portman's performance, but compared the film's story to that of Showgirls 1995 and The Burlesque 2010, while concluding, Black Swan is simply higher-priced cheese. Aronofsky's camber to Burlesque director Steve Anton's gender. Vulture as Kyle Buchanan also noted the similarities of the film's plot to the widely derided Showgirls and said that the director Darren Aronofsky owes a feather tip to Paul Verhoeven's exploitation classic more than might be willing to admit. The film has been criticized for its portrayal of ballet and ballet dancers. Upon the film's release in the United Kingdom, The Guardian interviewed 4 professional ballet dancers in the UK, Tamira Rojo, Lauren Cuthbertson, Edward Watson, and Elena Glargod. Rojo called the film lazy, featuring every ballet cliché going. Watson felt that the film makes a ballet look so naff and laughable. It doesn't show why ballet is so important to us, why we would want to try so hard. The Canadian press also reported that many Canadian ballet dancers felt that the film depicted dancers negatively and exaggerated elements of their lives. Uta gave Portman high marks for her dancey technique. In an interview with the Los Angeles Times, Gillian Murphy, a principal dancer with American Ballet Theatre, praised the visual elements of the film, but noted that the film presentation of the ballet world was extreme. Several critics noted striking similarities between Satoshi Kon's 1997 anime film Perfect Blue and Aronofsky's Black Swan. In response to comparisons between Perfect Blue and Black Swan, Aronofsky acknowledged the similarities in 2010, but denied that Black Swan was inspired by Perfect Blue. Kon noted in his blog that he had met with Aronofsky in 2001. Amy Westcott is credited as the costume designer and received several award nominations. A publicized controversy arose regarding the question of who had designed 40 ballet costumes for Portman and the dancers. An article in a British newspaper, The Independent, suggested those costumes had actually been created by Radrat's Kate and Laurie Levi. Westcott challenged that view and stated that in all only 7 costumes among them the black and white swan had been created in a collaboration between Radrat, Westcott and Aronofsky. Furthermore, the core ballet's costumes were designed by Zac Brown for the American Ballet Theatre and slightly adapted by Westcott and her costume design department. Westcott said, A controversy is too complimentary a word for two people using their considerably self-publicizing resources to loudly complain about their credit once they realized how good the film is. Abti dancer Sarah Lane served as a dancey double for Portman in the film. In a March 3 blog entry for Dance magazine, editor-in-chief Wendy Perone asked, "Do people really believe that it takes only 1 year to make a ballerina? We know that Natalie Portman studied ballet as a kid and had a year of intensive training for the film, but that doesn't add up to being a ballerina." However, it seems that many people believe that Portman did her own dancing in Black Swan. This led to responses from Benjamin Mila and Aronofsky, who both defended Portman, as well as a response from Lane claiming that she has not been given due credit. I've soured on Darren Aronofsky heavily over the years. I remember when I first saw Requiem for a Dream and initially I thought that it was an emotionally draining experience, and now it only ever manages to ring me as exploitative of its own character's misery at the hands of an agreeable message. But this was not something I found to be exclusive towards said film, because Black Swan, which may very well be his worst film yet, only manages to rub me in the wrong way for similar reasons. But for the many shortcomings of Requiem for a Dream, it never felt condescending in the way that Black Swan was. Among many reasons, it has only ever managed to leave such a bitter taste in my mouth. It seems so insistent that perfection leads to equally perfect art, and it's a product so explicitly mechanical, its own message only falls down upon itself. And the one thought that came to my mind after finishing up read, "This is why I hate Darren Aronofsky." Natalie Portman stars as Nina, the lead dancer for Swan Lake. In order to achieve artistic perfection, this also means it will cost her own sanity and even turn her own role much like that of Odell, the Black Swan, just as she finds her own life beginning to parallel that of Swan Lake while not being a literal follow beat by beat. To try my best to avoid comparing Black Swan to films that I have already handled similar story as better. The Red Shoes and Perfect Blue, the latter of which Aronofsky himself had purchased the rights for in order to recreate a scene in Requiem for a Dream. I'll get it out of the way that Black Swan is already telling a story that has been done before, which is the least of my own problems with it. Rather, instead, my immense dislike of Black Swan lies within how it tells what we've already seen before, as it only comes off as needlessly exploitative of her own misery in favor of artistic perfection. This sort of pessimism was the one thing that has always stuck out most from my own viewing of Requiem for a Dream. Darren Aronofsky relishes in it by placing so much on the surface, and the most aggravating aspect of said film came from how it further pushes down upon an agreeable message without expanding on it by growing increasingly worse on the surface. In Black Swan scenario, it seems to be the same for representing Nina's misery of working within the world of dancing, where she is forced to grow into the sort of persona that she is in order to achieve artistic perfection, which is where Aronofsky loses subtlety with the narrative, for he's always played upon melodrama like a sledgehammer, something that I'd also find myself appreciating more if the film weren't taking itself as seriously as it was. By Aronofsky's lens, it only believes in misery, and it's an extremely oppressive one at that. Among the many more of its own exploits, not a forced sexual growth as a result of her own instructor, as played by Vincent Cassel, also brings up another one of its biggest faults. There's an uncomfortably male gaze coming in with every minute of the interactions between Lily and Nina. For their own homosexuality feels portrayed as a fantasy for the outside as opposed to a part of themselves. But how Black Swan goes away with handling its idea of duality is perhaps the most troubling aspect, because it revels in another overused trope from horror movies, split personalities. But considering how many times it shifts between identities without setting a distinguished tone for each, it all feels like worthless meandering. Everything that the film wants to be feels present on the surface, tossed out in favor of another idea. then brought her back at the last minute. There's no thought coming forth as opposed to broad self-indulgence. If Natalie Portman were even any good in a Black Swan, then I'd be convinced that a film destroying artistic perfection it truly is baked out to be the way it is. But coming back to the artificiality of the film's narrative, most of the cast only strikes me as mechanical. Perhaps part of this comes from me not being a fan of Natalie Portman, but her hallucinatory performance only strikes me as overdone, like a bad mix of melodrama and horror tropes. The whole cast feels so mechanical, almost as much as the dancing itself, but that adds some more to why I find Black Swan so ingenuine. It just seems to pride itself on aggressiveness in the same manner that Aronofsky had went on to pride himself on appearing more intelligent than it actually is. For it's all just a bare bones we see. Aronofsky doesn't blur the line between a hallucination and reality, and as a result the final reveal only feels anticlimactic. Sometimes I wish I was able to appreciate Darren Aronofsky the way many of my peers do, but other than The Wrestler and The Fountain he's only seemed to let me down with every film after another. I won't deny that he's good at what he does, and I see why these films carry the appeal they do, but I just find Black Swan so unpleasant an experience even to think about. There's no subtlety present in Black Swan, but at the same time, I don't see much point when I know already I recognize so much of it as derivative of many other films that have handled a similar outlining better, for they don't indulge in the needless exploitation that Black Swan does. It all feels so sleazy in the sense that Brian De Palma was, although without being any bit fun or as interesting, because the lack of subtlety only shows an evident lack of self-reflexivity on Darren Aronofsky's part. It's all kept on the surface. I suppose this indulgence would have its appeal for some, but clearly not me. You might be noticing a trend in the movies I'm reviewing, or at least the fact that the past few haven't really been horror films and rather area films that won awards or some, or at least I haven't been reviewing so many horror movies as you'd like, so you'll have to deal with it. For example, Black Swan is a critically acclaimed film, but only door closers would call it a horror film. To this day, I have yet to see the trailer for this movie, which I think is a good thing considering how many people have been hyping this movie since it came out. And the trailer would have made me dislike it before even seeing it. I do remember the poster where Natalie Portman has on shitty makeup, and I also know that this has something to do with dancing and that Darren Aronofsky is kind of insane. Generally in a good way. Oh, and I got a comment yesterday about spoilers in Town, and this is just a reminder that will probably always post spoilers except if the enjoyment of the film hinges on what the surprise or twist is. For example, I am going to tell you the ending of this movie, yet, I don't feel as though the ending was a surprise, nor did the enjoyment of the movie increase or decrease with the ending. Natalie Portman plays a dancer named Nina who lives with her crazy mother who clearly failed in her own attempt to become a ballerina. Nina has the opportunity to take the lead in a famous director's version of Swan Lake, with that director being played by Vincent Cassel, who I saw is awesome in everything. In the audition process, Cassel's character explains that for the lead role, Nina will have to portray both a white swan and a black swan, one being good and only being evil, and that despite being an incredible white swan, he believes she doesn't have what it takes to be the Black Swan. Lucky for her, she proves herself enough to get the part. She's nervous that a newcomer named Lily, played by Kunis, will take over the part if she fails, yet sparks up a friendship with Lily anyway, who is nothing but encouraging. Cassel starts becoming more and more sexually explicit with Nina, physically engaging with her as well as instructing her to touch herself once she has the opportunity, hoping that it will bring out a different aspect of her that is required to play the Black Swan. She takes this advice and then realizes that her mom was asleep with her in the room a while, her own hand. Awkward. In addition to the stress of feeling like she isn't good enough and nervous about a Lily, Nen also is apparently scratching her back intensely without even knowing it, to the point of not remembering her wounds. This had been a problem before, as her mom knows how to trim her nails to stop it from happening, as well as using expensive makeup to cover the wounds. Now begins to fall deeper and deeper into her paranoid frenzy, picturing her face on other people, going out and doing drugs with a Lily, and fantasizing about a sexual encounter with her, which by the way takes place 69 minutes into the film. Awesome. Her relationship with Lily, as well as with her mom, starts to reach a breaking point as opening night approaches, with her mom trying to lock her in her room and calling the theater to have her understudy. Coincidentally, Lily stepping in for the role. Natalie attacks her mom and is able to attend the show, taking the role away from Lily. The ballet has multiple acts. Santana portrays the White Swan in the first act and does so flawlessly, just how everyone expected her to. When she gets back to her dressing room, Lily is waiting for her, and there is a violent altercation which results in Nena stabbing Lily and locking her in a closet. The next act, Nena is playing the Black Swan. And after this violent altercation goes out and shows herself as the Black Swan, as no one has imagined she could, and blows everyone away. Upon getting back to her dressing room to prepare to portray the White Swan on scene again, she looks at her outfit and says that she is bleeding from her stomach and that Lily is not in the closet. Instead, Lily knocks on the door to tell her how good of a job she is doing. Nena goes back on stage as the White Swan, and the ballet ends with the White Swan killing herself by jumping off of a platform. And when notice this, everyone rushes over to her to congratulate her, only to see the severity of her wounds. When asked what has happened to her wounds, which in hindsight were clearly self-inflicted, she claims that she was trying to attain a perfection, and the film goes bright white and the credits start. Really I had no clue that this is what the movie was about, since I knew some people had said it was scary or disturbing, and in moments it was. I really thought it was going to be something scary, aside from the obvious fear behind someone who could have such extreme dual hallucinated personalities. There were really only a few moments that startled you or took you by a surprise, rather than horror. This film was a manifestation of an individual's worst fears and anxieties. There were some slow parts that, having just finished the film, I felt a little bored at times, but as I sit here typing out the plot, it sounds a lot more enjoyable than what I remember watching. Natalie Portman's performance was extremely subtle, to the point that after watching it, I wasn't really blown away by her portrayal, despite acknowledging she played the role well. Once again, in a retrospect, her job was quite difficult and the role was indeed very challenging, and she deserves more credit than he initially gave her. Natalie Portman did a great job, but I can really say that she was the one who made this film. Aronofsky deserves just as much acclaim, especially for the subtleties he used throughout the film to hint at the things going on within the character's mind. Despite there being minimal visual effects, there were brief moments where not only was Nena not sure of what she saw, but the viewer was unsure as well. For example, the wounds on Na's back looked like scratches, yet the skin looked strange around it as well. As the wounds developed further, it got to the point that it appeared as though Nena was growing feathers, to the point that she even pulled out a feather from under her skin. This effect culminated in her performance as the Black Swan, where she not only psychology had transformed Buddha further and further into her dancing, her feathers grew and grew and grew, to the point that when the dance was over, her arms had completely transformed into wings. I've seen a few Aronofsky films and they typically are at one end of the spectrum or the other. At least as far as the intensity and complexity of the aesthetic elements as well as editing style. For example, both Requiem for a Dream and The Fountain are both quite ambitious in both style and subject matter, whether it be trying to portray characters in the lowest moments of their lives due to substance addiction, or be it their time-traveling experiences because of a fountain of youth. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have The Wrestler, which is a dialogue-heavy, A character-driven piece that was a lot more subdued and simple, at least in terms of the technical aspect of the movie. Black Swan started on one end, being mostly about Nana and hero paranoia and fear, and gradually go to closer and closer to the more experimental end of the spectrum, yet without seeming forced or fake. The more I talk about it, the more I want to see it again, because despite not being blown away upon first viewing, it's certainly worth another look. Oh, and Winona Ryder was in it, too. A ballerina gets the chance to play the White Swan, Princess Odette, but she finds herself slipping into madness when Thomas, the artistic director, decides that Lilia might fit the role better. This film is in its story, visuals and tone the quintessential though not the best Aronofsky vehicle. When you think of him, you will think of this one for sure. The psychological elements were so effective here, with some of the imagery being striking and memorably horror-inspired. This was the film that had brought Natalie Portman her Oscar, and deservedly so. She was excellent in the role that is honestly quite underwritten. I expected stronger character development in a film that focuses so heavily on Nana and her journey, but Portman elevated the role with a commendable confident performance that is both very emotionally versatile and physically demanding. She was thoroughly believable in the first half when she was more demure, and also in the second half when she was genuinely unhinged. The movie features a ton of typecasting in the supporting roles, but I did not mind this, as these people were obviously perfect for these types of roles. Vincent Cassel was a natural fit for this abusive director. Barbara Hershey was so well cast in the role of the domineering mother. Mona stole the movie from these two in the role of her friend and biggest competition. The scenes between the two were easily the most entertaining ones of the bunch. Black Swan is at its best during those deranged moments. The psychological thriller elements were gloriously over the top and melodramatic, while also being superbly shot, scored, and directed. Aronofsky has always been a perfect fit for this genre, and his directing on this movie is among his best, undoubtedly. The movie is very well edited and paced, continuously being engaging to watch, and at times even riveting. The ending worked for me, though I realize how some may find it frustrating. The imagery made this movie what it is, which is wonderfully surreal and ambiguous in quality. The film has the calm before the storm effect that made it very successful. It deserved most of its Oscar nominations and critical praise, with one caveat, and that is the screenplay. I have to say that I find Black Swan to be pretty much the meeting of two similarly themed movies released previously, The Red Shoes and A Perfect Blue. The ballet scenes were very similar to the former classic, and the overall story beats were almost the same, while the thriller, horror elements and the double imagery were pretty much directly taken from the latter anime. Ida loses points for being so unoriginal for me. Black Swan is a 2010 American psychological horror film directed by Darren Aronofsky from a screenplay by Mark Heyman, John Cloflin, and Andressa Hines, and is based on the story written by Hines. This film stars Natalie Portman in the lead role, with Vincent Cassel, Kunis, Barbara Hershey, and Winona Ryder in supporting roles. The plot of this film revolves around a production of Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake by the Company of New York City Ballet. This production requires one of their ballerinas to play the innocent and fragile White Swan, in which Nana is a perfect fit, as well as the sensual and dark Black Swan, which is embodied by Nana's new rival, Lily. Nana gets overwhelmed by a feeling of thick pressure when she finds herself competing for the role, which causes her to lose her grip on reality and begins to spiral into madness. Virginal girl, pure and sweet, trapped in the body of a swan, said Thomas Loy, the ballet director played by Vincent Cassel. She desires freedom, but only true love can break the spell. Her wish is newly granted in the form of a prince, before he can declare his love, the lustful twin, the Black Swan, tricks and seduces him. Devastated, the White Swan leaps off a cliff, killing herself, and in death finds freedom. This quote Isa delivered in the beginning, which sets the tone for the rest of the film. Neha effortlessly embodies the white swan, a flawless, fragile, and pure. This Isa without her trying. However, the Swan Queen requires the white and black swan to be played entirely. Nina begins breaking out of her cage, and as the film goes on, her mental and physical state gets worse. She slowly begins to go more insane while transitioning into the Black Swan. This film depicts the mental state of a woman going through an intense amount of pressure to be perfect and flawless while she seems to be losing her mind and harming herself a little by little. Near the beginning of the film, a red bloody scratch is being shown on Nena's back. She brushes it off and isn't sure how it's appeared. Also, she tries to escape from being just the white swan. She begins opening herself up to fully become the evil seductive Black Swan, which are all features Lily, the second candidate for the Swan Queen role, can do better. Nina begins trying to become Lily and projects herself as becoming the perfect Black Swan onto her. This is where her hallucinations begin. Na begins shifting between the reality and her false perceptions of herself and Lily. She begins going through stages of schizophrenia where everything around her becomes abnormal. Her descent into a state of madness begins shortly after. She goes through an identity crisis and is imagining herself everywhere all at once. Her hallucinations even begin attacking her. She sees her legs bend backward and it pulls a feather out of her cut mentally. She is becoming the Black Swan in a physical sense. Throughout this film, mirrors are constantly being shown. Now is surrounded by them and they're being used to symbolize her slowly becoming somebody else entirely. It's a reflection of her current self, undergoing metamorphosis. It also represents body image and the ongoing theme of perfection. Nina constantly says, "I just want to be perfect," and being in an industry as strict as ballet with body shape, size, and weight. The cost of perfection only comes with an incredibly large toll on one's mental and physical health. Aroma. The beginning of the film, we see Nina's room, which seems to emulate a child's room. Everything is fluffy and pink, and she has stuffed animals surrounding her walls. This is all because of her mother's obsession with Nina being perfect and plays a significant role in the decline of Na's mental and physical state. Na's mother retired from being an artist at 28 to raise Nina, and because of this, she projects onto her and yearns for her to be flawless and do everything she couldn't. As she states, "I gave it up to raise you." She feels a strong sense of jealousy towards her daughter and treats her as if she's a child. Now is being highly infantilized by her obsessive mother and isn't able to essentially evolve. She is stuck between being a child and a woman. Her mother forcefully helps her change and cuts her fingernails, insinuating she's a child who can't do it without her mother's help. Her mother seems to have BPD, a bipolar disorder, and has a switch in her mood almost instantly. She's either one or the other. One example of these would be when she brought Nina cake which Na didn't want to eat because of calories, which then leads her mother to a snap and move to throw away the entire cake. Na's name also means little girl or young girl in Spanish, which can express the image her mother portrays onto her. Her mother is seen painting her over and over again and hanging her portraits up. Her obsession with Nina becoming the perfect person that she gave up her future to raise only worsens her state of mind. Lily, Nina's understudy in the role and the persona Nina projects the side she can get into touch with has a major role in the development of Nina and the psychosis Nina goes through. Lily embodies the white swan's evil twin, perfectly seductive, lustful, and wild. It's natural to her to the point that the director even points not towards her so she could get a look at what she's supposed to be like to efficiently play both parts. She gains an obsession with becoming just as wild as Lily, and that's when she begins hallucinating that not only is she sexually involved with Lily, but that she ends up killing her. Her physical awakening was postponed due to her overprotective mother. And although Nina and Lily being involved didn't actually happen, it opened up a path to a side Na hasn't explored. Alongside this, her director's constant sexual advances towards her, as well as her body dysmorphia and lack of eating pushed her to a harmful mental state. Colors in this film are very prominent and symbolize the stages Na's going through to become the Black Swan. As the film begins, and for about 70% of it, we see mostly lighter shades being depicted from her clothing to her surroundings. Then we start to see more neutrals and Na's style slowly starts shifting into a darker shades. At the end of the film, we see darker colors more prominently, draped in black. Nana fully embodies the essence of the Black Swan. Monochrome colors are constantly surrounding Nana throughout the film, from the walls in the dance hall to the subtle things around her. This can be interpreted in a few ways. One is the contrast between the white and black swan and how Nina is constantly reminded she needs to seamlessly embody both. It is also interpreted as the way Na views the world, black and white, simply like a child. Once the final ballet takes place and Na goes to perform the White Swan, she messes up and can't do it. She isn't the innocent, fragile girl she was at first, which makes embodying the White Swan impossible for her. She has broken out of her cage, and there isn't any way for her to return. She then continues and embodies the Black Swan flawlessly. She becomes the role. It's perfect. Na is the Black Swan with no sense of identity. She takes on that role and embodies it to the fullest extent. After she hallucinates that she has stabbed Lily and realizes she's only stabbed herself, she doesn't seem to be in pain. It's represented as the opposite, comparing Na's final ballet as the Black Swan to her first in the film. A completely different character's area being depicted. After Nana's final jump, she falls onto the mattress and Ida switches into a white screen. The white screen symbolizes the light at the end of the tunnel, the final destination, and the White Swan suicide. Just as the ballet director stated, Darren Aronofsky's Black Swan is a full-born melodrama told with passionate intensity, gloriously and darkly absurd. It centers on a performance by Natalie Portman that is nothing short of heroic, and mirrors the conflict of good and evil in Tchaikovsky's ballet Swan Lake. It is one thing to lose yourself in your art. Portman's ballerina loses her mind. Everything about classical ballet lends itself to excess. The art form is one of a grand gesture, of the illusion of a triumph over reality, and even the force of gravity. Yet, it demands from the performers years of rigorous perfectionism, the kind of physical and mental training that takes ascendancy over normal life. This conflict between the ideal and the reality is consuming Nina Sears Portman's character. Her life has been devoted to ballet. Was that entirely her choice? Her mother Erica Barbara Hershey was a dancer once and now dedicates her life to her daughter's career. They share a small apartment that feels sometimes like a refuge, sometimes like a cell. They hug and chatter like sisters. Something feels wrong. Nina dances in a company at New York's Lincoln Center, ruled by the autocratic Thomas Loy. Vincent Cassel. The reach of his ego is suggested by his current season, which will remake the classics. Having cast off his former prima ballerina and lover, Beth McIntyre, Winona Ryder, he is now auditioning for a new lead. Swan Lake requires the lead to play opposite roles. Nina is clearly the best dancer for the White Swan, but Thomas finds her too perfect for the Black Swan. She dances with technique, not feeling. The film seems to be unfolding along lines that can be anticipated. There's tension between Nina and Thomas, and then Lily, Monis, a new dancer, arrives from the West Coast. She is all Nina is not: bold, loose, confident. She fascinates Nina not only as a rival but even as a role model. Lily is among other things a clearly sexual being, and we suspect Nina may never have been on a date, let alone slept with a man. For her, Lily presents a professional challenge and a personal rebuke. Thomas the Beast is well known for having affairs with his dancers, played with intimidating arrogance by Cassel. He clearly has plans for the virginal Nina. This creates a crisis in her mind. How can she free herself from the technical perfection and sexual repression enforced by her mother while remaining loyal to their incestuous psychological relationship? No backstage ballet story can be seen without the Red Shoes 1948 coming into mind, if you've never seen it. Of course eventually you will. In the character of Thomas Aronofsky and Cassel evoke Boris Lermontow. Anton Wabrook, the impresario in that film whose autocratic manner masks a deep possessiveness, and in Menina. There is a version of family Shires and new, so driven to please. Black Swan will remind some viewers of Aronofsky's previous film, The Wrestler. Both show single-minded professionalism in the pursuit of a career leading to the destruction of personal lives. I was reminded also of Aronofsky's brilliant debut with by 1998 about a man driven mad by his quest for the universal mathematical language. For That Matter is the Fountain 2007 was about a man who seems to conquer time and space. Aronofsky's characters make no little plans. The main story supports of Black Swan are traditional backstage rivalry, artistic jealousy, a great work of art mirrored in the lives of those performing it. Aronofsky drifts earlier from those reliable guidelines into the mind of Nina. She begins to confuse the boundaries. The film opens with a dream and it becomes clear that her dream life is contiguous with her waking one. Aronofsky and Portman follow these fearlessly where it takes them. Portman's performance is a revelation from this actress who was a 13-year-old charmer in Beautiful Girls 1996. She has never played a character she's obsessed before and never faced a greater physical challenge. She prepared it by training for 10 months. Somehow she goes over the top and yet stays in a character even at the extremes. You don't catch her acting. The other actors are like dance partners holding her aloft. Barbara Hershey provides a perfectly calibrated performance as a mother whose love is real. Ozia's shortcomings are not signaled. Whose own perfectionism has all been focused on the creation of her daughter. The tragedy of Nina and of many young performers and athletes is that a perfection in one area of life has led to sacrifices in many of the others. At a young age, everything becomes focused on pleasing someone, a parent, a coach, a partner, and somehow it gets wired that the person can never be pleased. One becomes perfect in every area except for life itself. It's traditional in many ballet-based dramas for summing up to take place in a braver third act. Black Swan has a beauty. All of the themes of the music and life, all of the parallels of story and ballet, all of the confusion of reality and dream come together in a grand exhilaration of towering passion. There is really only one place this can take us, and it does. If I were you, I wouldn't spend too much time trying to figure out exactly what happens in practical terms. Lots of people had doubts about the end of the Red Shoes, too. They were wrong. They did. By now, we can all appreciate that when you watch a Darren Aronofsky film, you won't leave the film feeling the same as you entered it. Yet, this was the case when I watched The Black Swan, a film about ballet. You'll be forgiven for thinking that a film about ballet would be bloody boring. However, then you would be quickly unforgiven for thinking a film from Aronofsky Barnoa would be boring because he had bloody well ain't son. That being said, the first half hour were pretty uneventful and unnerving for all the wrong reasons. Natalie Portman's leading woman man-child Nina Sears was really quiet and just a bit weird. I feel equally that this was both the filmmaker's intention and an accident. If it was the filmmaker's intention, well done, I guess. If it was an accident, then it was one on the part of the actress who somehow won an Oscar for the role. Around this point, I was struggling to see what all the fuss was about this film. Quite unimpressed. Now, what I'm about to say may be very untrustworthy, especially from a 15-year-old's point of view, but it was around the lesbian sex scene when the film got really good. Darren Aronofsky's tragic psychodrama Black Swan puts ballet onto a dark stage of obsession and shocking imagery, laced with overtones of sexual repression, paranoia, and body horror. This Egypt fairy tale comes rich with metaphors that are easily read, but no less impactful for their straightforwardness. Though it resists clear exposition, the narrative unfolds with twists and turns that are sometimes predictable, yet always dramatically significant. Mattia with all the bold visual style and a narrative daring that one expects from Aronofsky, it proves to be his most ambitious and emotionally satisfying a film thus far. The film marks a step forward in Aronofsky's career, employing his powerful sense of the visual from A Requiem for a Dream and The Fountain, and he combines that with the dramatic consequence of The Wrestler. The result feels like something between Powell and Presbygus the Red Shoes and Roman Polanski's Repulsion, in that the film represents a backstage ballet melodrama that takes place within the twisted psyche of the protagonist. Our perspective is that of a lead dancer whose sanity quickly comes into question as her connection to her dancing drives her to evident hallucinations which become more obvious, more visceral, and more dangerous as her psychological transformation manifests. Natalie Portman gives an incredibly performance as Nina Sears, a young ballerina struggling for perfection to appease her company's impresario Thomas Loy. The splendid Vincent Cassel. Nina wins the lead role of the Swan Queen in Laroy's new production of Swan Lakia with her technical skill, which makes her ideal for the innocent white swan role, but she lacks the sensuality and the spontaneity of the role's alter ego Thea Black Swan. Loy attempts to release Nina's passions so that she might unlock her repressed sexuality and channel it into her performance, but she remains difficult to coax, and so now grows obsessed with the idea that Loy will select someone else from the company to replace her, such as Lilian Monis, whose grasp of sexuality seems effortless in comparison. At home, Nina's domineering mother, a Barbara Hershey, treats her like a fragile child who will break under too much pressure, hinting at past psychological problems that would make Nina incapable of being on her own. Filled with stuffed animals and a pink color scheme, Nina's room shows evidence that her mother has sheltered her, and maybe rightfully so. Scratches appear on Na's back, broken skin on her fingers, and bumps under her skin that may be black feathers emerging from within, as though she was literally becoming her part. Some of these physical signs are imagined, while the others are not. As she grows further into her role, Na's paranoia takes over, and she anticipates betrayal at every turn, thrusting herself into violent, even self-destructive resolutions. But since everything we see comes from Na's perspective, we cannot trust our eyes. Rather, we must trust only how the film cleverly links us with Nina's mental state. Unstable and unsettling though it may be, Aronofsky shoots almost exclusively with handheld cameras in intimate close-ups that foresaw a connection between the viewer and the film's characters. This approach heightens the emotional response. It places a distance between the viewer and our appreciation of the technical dancing. Only a few wide shots allow us to appreciate the ballet sequences themselves in their entirety. Aronofsky prefers keeping the frame tight on his protagonist's expressions, her emotions reeling as the camera rotates around her. Much of the action occurs on Portman's face, her every gesture revealing another insecurity or a fear. In some ways, Aronofsky's choice to employ so many close-ups was wise that the connection between Nina and the audience remains undeniable, almost tangible. He uses several shots of mirror reflections, suggesting increasing duality and fragmentation. Still, the viewer never gathers an appreciation for the beauty of dance, the artistry, or the physical grace and the toils behind it. More close-ups show Na's open wounds, some made through a dance. Yet, Aronofsky fails to develop in the viewer an appreciation for the art form. Given these choices, Black Swan becomes more about Nina's crumbling psychology than dance, whereas it is dance that propels her to such extreme behavior. It would seem crucial that we understand both. What's more, Portman trained for months to learn ballet, so few dance doubles were needed during shooting. although the viewer can hardly take full notice of Portman's efforts because Aronofsky so rarely pulls back for a panoramic view of the ballet sequences. These are mere preferences from a formula perspective, however, and hold little bearing on the impact of the film from an emotional standpoint, which by the conclusion sweeps the viewer away with its potent metaphors and crushing last scene. The film makes an obvious companion piece to Iran's last release, The Wrestler, which offered a character study through the backdrop of professional wrestling. Shot in a similar grainy really their style, both films fall on performers who punish themselves through their art. Thought wrestling is surely the low art of ballet's high art, more sophisticated and intricate than that film. Black Swan warrants a profound response, both from its stark melodramatic turns and from the sheer authority behind its artistic ambitions. This is an impressive work that may lack the affection that The Red Shoes has for a dance, but through its confronting visual intensity never fails to be evocative. I don't know why, but it's not the reason you're thinking yet dirty basted. Though the scene itself was nothing to frown at, I'd give it an 8/10. It served as an earmark to indicate that the rest of the film was absolutely fantastic. You know, when I snarkily said something when talking about Portman winning an Oscar for her role, I was only letting you on, weren't I? Flipping I'm a joker and she really came into her own after the scene, as what followed was a surreal mind trip after Na had been influenced by the darker desires of Lilia, played by Kunis, who she believes to be trying to steal her role. Wait a minute. Have I explained the plot yet? Damn it, give us a seconds then. Black Swan is a film about a shelter-dedicated ballet dancer Portman gaining the lead role. Lena Swan Lake playing the white and black swan get a cause of the title, after her being pushed to pursue her darker side by her instructor Thomas Vincent Cassel. Her mind snaps and she begins a downward spiral towards perfection, all the while being rivaled by Lily Kunis. Bloody hell, sorry about the lateness. Whether it was seeing this character who until now was extremely innocent is still living with her mom now being an utter rebel or something else, it had a powerful effect on me as the viewer. That was why Natalie Portman won at the Oscar, and I must say it was some of the absolute best character development we've seen in a very long time. Supporting a Portman to great effect and forming an excellent backbone for the film is Vincent Cassel as Thomas. The key to his performance was how my reaction to his character shifted throughout the film. At first, I thought he was creepy cause he was rubbing her and stuff while they were dancing. It was pretty creepy. However, after a lot of development, he almost became a sort of mentor. Maybe even a father figure. That sounds weird. I can appreciate that. You're probably thinking, what kind of father figures did you have? None like he had that. Thanks for asking. Just trust me, it was odd, but good. Accompanying Cassel in the supporting cast is Moniza as the aforementioned Lily. Here a character was also quite oddly motivated. It seems through the eyes of Anna. She's the antagonist. However, when the Nanina filter lifts, she just trying to help her out. I think Lily is the perfect example of how the film's direction is successful in toying with your mind. Not to mention perfectly, almost comfortably, played by Kunis. Every once in a blue moon, I'll write out about the cinematography and sound design. Woody Allen caught that them is blue tonight. On a technical level, this film is close to flawless. As you'd expect from a film of this caliber, the score accompanying the scenes is of a fairy tale-like nature, running a parallel to the plot, which I thought it was a nice touch. The sharp violin strikes and fantastical feeling really contradicts the camera work. The camera work, contrasting the soundtrack quite dramatically, was gritty and realistic, following the trend with Oscar-baiting dramas at the moment, with a lot of uneasy shakiness emphasizing the main character's psyche. On top of this, the amount of surreal imagery in the film is staggering. Scenes involving self-mutilation and other lovely themes really were uncomfortable to watch, but were pivotal to the plot and increased the atmosphere and experience tenfold, sometimes even reminding me of The Shining. However, There was also a lot of subliminal imagery in the lighting, which I also somehow picked up on. Whether it was purposeful or not, it really did make me think a rare occurrence. Overall, Black Swan is a deserved Oscar winner, be it only performance-wise. It delivers in the psychological thriller genre like a mother and his chock-a-block with underlying messages that make it more of a case study than a film, which isn't a criticism. That being said, however, it does suffer from a lackluster first act which fails to serve as an indicator for what was to come, which was nail-biting, skin-stripping, feather-growing thriller with an absolutely jaw-dropping finale. Darren Aronofsky's Black Swan, starring Natalie Portman, examines the physically demanding art of ballet while experimenting with themes such as drama and horror to create an enthralling experience to haunt the audience without following the established traits of those genres. As a result, we have a relentlessly entertaining film that with skillful manipulation of mirrors urges the viewer to question the reality of the events on display that provides a dichotomy which makes the film persistently captivating. This technique utilized by Darren Aronofsky is significant of the film's central theme of the duality of oneself. This theme is embodied by the innocent and innocent Natalie Portman having to represent the character of the Black Swan, a creature of lustful and impulsive desire after she receives the coveted role in Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake. The personality is antithetical to her own and that closely mirrors that of the white swan. Nena is coerced by her liberacious director Thomas Lloyd Vincent Cassel to discover the side of her personality that dives into progressively iniquitous depths while living under the shadow of her inescapably obsessive mother Erica Barbara Hershey. When delving deeper into these depths, Nena loses grasp on our reality. Kunis Lily, who is a significant character who dials back the surrealism and grounds the narrative into reality once more due to a calculated performance and script. Regularly, Lily is observant of Nena's declining perception of reality and it provides an essential derisive perspective on the matter. As a sexually repressed woman, Lily not only draws hero back to reality, but draws no closer towards adulthood and independence. The film confidently blurs the line between thrilling and horrific scenes where a palpable sense of horror is felt primarily in the intense scenes of bodily self-harm. Due to the excellent visuals and editing, these scenes are impactful with the use of the juxtaposition of black and white blatantly portraying the theme of darkness against innocence, thus implying good vs evil. However, there is an underlying notion of ambiguity incorporated by the director through the use of color in the costume and the production design reliant on what circumstances the characters are in. Also, Mark Heyman, Andre Hines, and John McClelland's script must be commended for inviting the audience to question the film and seamlessly blending Nena's own story with that of Swan Lake itself. Black Swan is a cataclysmic view of perfection and the devotion that is displayed by Nena to achieve it. The surreal and terrifying aspects shown through the protagonist is an incredulous surprise to someone like you myself who knew very little about the film upon viewing. Certainly, it's an enthrallingly emotive and visceral experience. Black Swan is a raw and beautifully brutal film with a masterful use of pacing as the film slowly and gradually builds to a final act that is endowed with tension as Tchaikovsky's scenario coalesces with Aronofsky's narrative that intensifies into a stunningly devastating climax. The 5 films of director Darren Aronofsky have covered a more conceptual and visually idiomatic ground than the entire careers of filmmakers with 5 times the output. A surpassingly cheap and grimy thriller about a paranoid mathematician. A whirling 2-hour music video about drug addiction. A CGI adult fantasia on the meaning of time, mortality, and identity. And social realist biography of an athlete's one last chance. What has combined them all is the grand meme of obsession. If you are an important character in an Aronofsky film, it is very likely that there is one thing you want above all others, and in pursuit of that thing will sacrifice every relationship and comfort you know, And here we have Black Swan, which is both a new genre and mostly a new visual style. It's the story of a sexually repressed ballerina going nuts under the pressure of having to dance Odette Odell in Swan Lake. Filmed in a handheld variant style in a similar manner to Aronofsky's last feature, The Wrestler, but with a wholly added dollop of the creepiest crawliest body horror of 2010 and metaphorically laden psychoterror that reminded me, if anything, of Roman Polanski's Repulsion, and is otherwise the most Aronofsky movie yet. Obsessionists' heart and soul, its bread and butter, specifically the obsession with a perfection both aesthetic, the ballet, and immoral, the heroine's mother instilled abhorrence of sexual impurity. The ballerina in question is Nina Sears, a Natalie Portman, the daughter of a former dancer named Barbara Hershey, who gave up her own career when she became pregnant and has become quite the stage mother in the interim. Closely monitoring every minute detail of Nana's life and driving the under woman, not so young, in her middle or late 20s, and still living with her mother in a bedroom without locking a door and too many tacky belly-themed stuffed toys to count to neurosis. We get the understanding that there have been other dark moments in Nana's life wherein the pressure of being Erica's pride and joy led her to acts of self-mutilation, having caught the eye of the lascivious impresario Thomas Lloyd Vincent Cassel. Nana is cast as the bipartite lead of Tchaikovsky's ballet, The White Swan Odette representing virginal purity and the Black Swan Odell representing a carnality lacking the requisite sexual history to a convincing play. Odell as smoldering and seductive as Thomas demands. Nana is driven to frustration and then worse, particularly in light of the new choreo member Lily Monas, who won an acting award at Venice, who is raw and physical in all the places that Nana's fertilely and chaste and whose stand in more Cassel Odell is precisely the sensual ravishment that Thomas is looking for. As Nana goes crazy under the demands of her director, her own sense of personal failure, her mother's smiling harpy wickedness, and her uncertain feelings towards the now friendly, now scamming Lily, Black Swan falls steadily apart, yoking itself more and more to the hallucinations and waking nightmares that begin to define her perception of the world. It is by all means a grubby melodrama with loving attention paid to such details as Ma's tentative masturbation sessions and her terrifying visions of a doppelganger who might be Lily lurking and waiting to kill her, and the inexplicable scars and physical deformities afflicting the body that she views with something akin to visceral loathing. But I for one generally prefer Aronofsky and his grubby face, and now as good a time to admit at any that even when I admire his work the most, I find his films generally unlikable. His aesthetic choices strike me as no choices at all, but a whirlwind of activity, tossing every idea that comes into his head in front of the camera simply because it excites him, and really they all have energy to spare. Aronofsky's projects are thus as much annoying for their obvious squandered potential as they are exhilarating for what they do accomplish, which is always a considerable. This approach probably works better in a horror film than in the other genres the director has attacked. And while, making no mistake, Black Swan is never going to end up on the shelves next to Black Sunday, the moments of greatest impact in the movie are almost exclusively the most classically horrific, as Nana grows certain that she is herself transforming into the Black Swan, the rippling of CGI goose flesh across her body, and the spontaneous eruptions of blood on her hands and feet. Only a particularly bracing scene witnesses Nana tearing a long strip of skin off her finger, or so she thinks, have an intensely unsettling effect. More genuinely upsetting than anything an American horror movie has been able to come up with in several years, and it must be said. Aronofsky is just also willing to indulge in cheap tricks. The number of false jump scares is unforgivable for a movie with this kind of art house credibility, though the body horror much outweighs the slasher movie theatrics. As does the good old-fashioned this isn't right tension. Omnipresent in the film from its dramatic opening scene, a dream in which Nana as the White Swan is menaced by the ballet's villain von Rothbart, skulking in the inky shadows surrounding the dancer, And if Black Swan were content to remain a grubby horror film, I guess I wouldn't have a word to say against it. But its divesa into psychological investigation are so damned important and so mostly flat, that it tends to suck some of the energy away from the very real successes in off-screen, just like something has in every other film. For starters, the use of fast symbolism is about as subtle as the grand piano to the head. The black, white imagery is of course inherent in Swan Lake itself. But there is a material difference between ballet, the most abstract of all narrative forms, and a cinema, nominally the least abstract, at any rate. While the color coding is at times clever and at times haunting, you don't know what value it serves the movie that every single time we see him once until the very end, she's draped all in black, the central idea of the ballerina. Every cliched little girl's a dream job and an opportunity for the repressed Nina to exert control over her body is underdeveloped except as a plot hook. It helps not at all that Portman and Kunis though game are not also good at ballet as the film suggests. The Aurora requires them to be with the film and not even exploring the characters Mila as thoroughly as the wrestler did. Frankly, I don't know that the director working from a rather programmatic script by Mark Heyman, Andreas Hines, and John McLaughlin really cares that much about Nena, who is treated very much as an object and not as a personality in his framing. The famed Aronofsky back of the head shot is much in evidence and who is relegated in the story to an entirely reactive character which gives Portman almost nothing to work with, leaving the actress stranded in a whole lot of variations on the Sammy a basic confused and scared face until the last 20 minutes. Anyway, the only time that the film opens up whatsoever and the dramatic force of the plot catches up to the rich visual style that is so much more apparently interesting to the filmmakers. And by all means, Black Swan looks amazing. Matthew Levatik's harsh Super 16 cinematography is one of the great achievements of the year. Plunging a blacks and blinding whites and not a whole lot else with grains the size of $50, adding a thick veneer fat texture that makes the film seem at once more real and more abstract, like a tactile fairy tale. Certainly, Black Swan is a fairy tale if fits anything. It's a damn chilly film, though with a little genuine insight into the human condition and no interest in providing such insight. Only a problem because the film sets it up in such unmissable terms so that it shall be very much a character study. I suppose there's something compelling in its depiction of Aminda descending into utter madness viscerally if for no other reason, but it's just not that strong as a vision of the crazy artist or the sexually repressed woman, even as a story of the ballerina broken by her desire to achieve perfection. Ida says nothing that wasn't said with infinitely more success in the 62-year-old The Red Shoes. Yet, there's no denying that the thing gets deep under your skin. It gets there in just about the least reputable way it could, but it certainly gets there. Ballad a horror / drama / a psychosexual thriller. Black Swan revels and positively gets off on a highly pleasing central paradox. It's also elegant and overblown as ballet itself. We follow socially awkward, repressed ballet dancer Natalie Portman competing for a much-coveted leading role in a New York Ballet's new production of Swan Lake, between a deliberately physically hurting herself and being berated by Heron mother Barbara Hershey's Erica. Nena manages to stave off competition from outgoing ballet queen Beth McIntyre, Winona Ryder and new girl on the block Lily Mona's toe the role. However, when her wish comes true, she gets more than she bargained for. This is not least from the production's director Vincent Cassel's Thomas Loy, a notoriously manipulative woman. Yet, it's more than that. The role proves the trigger for her unraveling. Now believes she is being targeted by jealous dancers. Increases in her self-harming, and strangely of all, believes she is physically transforming. But is this all in her head? From the opening sequence in which frigidly-looking Nena is starkly lit on an empty stage only to be assaulted by a fellow rather terrifying dancer or possibly a monster, you know this ain't going to be The Red Shoes. While Paola and Press Bagger's dance sequences were shown in stately long shot, Aronofsky gets it right in there, an agonizing close-up, revealing the painful physical hardships, hair pulling, and the bittersweet emotional consequences of fame. It's also quite possibly a horror film playing inside its central character's head, as Nina's fantasy of becoming a ballet leading lady comes true. Things get all cron and virgin. Nina believes she may be turning into a swan. She is getting marks on her back and sees bumps on her skin. She also has to confront her repressed nature. Half of her role is to take on the character of the Black Swan, the more sexual, seductive part she will have ever played. This leads her through a whole host of new experiences, from the titillating to the terrifying. Ambitious then, but director Aronofsky isn't one known to shy away from extremes. And the movie follows through to theatricality in its offstage antics. Shock and shots through the movie like a message in a stick of seaside rock. Most satisfyingly, the ending neither confirms nor denies the ongoing discussion between fantasy and reality. Aronofsky has encouraged the actress to and gets the boldest performance from Natalie Portman since her debut in A Lion. Winona Ryder is also strangely energized, and she scores a number of highly memorable scenes in the movie. But the revelation here is Barbara Hershey. Hershey has been on and off the screen for a while, but here she reminds us of why she raised eyebrows in 80s movies like Beaches. In many ways, her wide-eyed portrayal of a suffocating parent is similar to Piper Laurie's mother role in Carrie. Surely the epitome of control freak matriarchy. If audiences can deal with the outrageous plot developments, the hyperbole tone, and the unsettling beauty, Black Swan may well prove the calling card for the best director of a generation. It's incredibly accomplished stuff. Darren Aronofsky originally intended to make a single film about a love affair between a wrestler and a ballerina. That didn't work out as planned, and so The Wrestler 2008 was made first, with Black Swan following 2 years later. Despite being divided into separate stories, the films remain as companion pieces. The ring and the stage are entirely different worlds, but the films examine a common theme: the destruction of oneself for the sake of a performance. Aronofsky tackles the idea with a more edgy approach this time around. But there is no doubt that the two films are opposite sides of the same coin. Ballet dancer Natalie Portman is determined to land a leading role in her company's production of Tchaikovsky's Swan-like. Her innocence, elegance, and delicacy make her a perfect candidate for the White Swan, one half of the character. The same traits prevent her from playing the titular Black Swan, which is aggressive, seductive, and dark. As Nana struggles to embody both halves of the character, she begins to lose her grip on reality. Things are made worse by an oppressive mother, an imposing director, and a talented rival who threatens to snatch the role away. Portman does a phenomenal job as Nina. She plays her emotions and her frailty with such conviction that her mental disintegration feels natural and credible. Her dedication to the role is obvious, shrinking down to unhealthy proportions and training tirelessly for a year transformed her into a proper ballerina. Even more impressively, she manages to act and keep up with the crazy choreography at the same time, doing both so flawlessly that an Oscar is inevitable. The camera work by Matthew Libatique perfectly communicates the frantic nature of the story. Mirrors are used creatively, and the liberal use of the close-up, especially during the dancing, creates a claustrophobic atmosphere that complements the film's sinister nature. Clint Manuel scores a brilliantly creepy reworking of Tchaikovsky's pieces. It is an effective composition, perfectly reflecting the film's mix of beauty and menace. Somewhat disappointingly, the first half of Black Swan is a little slow with an overemphasis on setting up the story. There is also perhaps slightly too great a focus on the dancing. However, the pace allows for the mood to build until a truly insane final act that delivers a satisfying payoff. The works of Cronenberg, Polanski, and Lynch, all of them masters of uncomfortable cinema, echo throughout. Black Swan combines the body horror of Fatherfly, the paranoia of the tenant, and the surrealism of Mulholland Drive in a blend of menace so varied that it keeps the audience genuinely uneasy throughout. Yet Aronofsky does not rely on others to hold up his film. He has taken the tools crafted by others and created for himself a refreshingly demented film, in his own way. He combines beauty and perfection with madness and paranoia. Ballet is meant to be graceful, but the mood that Aronofsky creates is one of frenzy. There are scary films and there are beautiful films, and it is in the juxtaposition of the two that Aronofsky triumphs. Over the years, Aronofsky has built himself a solid reputation for making films that are difficult to put in a box, and Black Swan is no different. It doesn't know if it wants to be beautiful or ugly, so it is a mashup of both. It aims to seduce and repulse at the same time, and it succeeds. Never has a film been so simultaneously elegant and vulgar, uncomfortable and occasionally nasty, and yet it is one of the most exhilarating in recent cinema. Darren Aronofsky's 2008 film, The Wrestler, had the kind of grip a movie about wrestling ought to have. It packed a punch because it was rooted in realism. A realism that sometimes went beyond the real into the realm of the surreal. The story of a wrestler whose considerable talent and courage was not enough to save him from a life bent on self-destruction kept a hold on the audience even up to and after its overreaching finale. The story and the character played magnificently by Mickey Rourke had me too transfixed, too engrossed, and yes, too resigned to the hero's fate to let the disappointment over his inevitable fall follow me out of the theater. I felt as invigorated as I felt saddened. The fighter's effort was certainly worth the try. I had no such feeling as I watched Aronofsky's new film, The Black Swan. The movie has a remarkable ending. It's not unlike the ending of The Wrestler. Both end with an arm-spreading dive. The last scenes of The Black Swan comprise a visual tour de force whose dark depths and hyperkinetic spirals are almost a match for Tchaikovsky's haunting score. Unfortunately, the film falls apart long before the closing segment, and the final moments don't generate quite enough steam to save the movie. Everything that precedes the ending is dense, claustrophobic, and weighed down by so much high-minded cynicism and a pretentious artifice that it never gets off the ground. That's deadly for a movie about dancing, which ought to be light on its feet. Natalie Portman is a member of the ballet corps of a fictional company that bears more than a passing resemblance to the New York City Ballet with its cutting-edge artistry, a hard-driving competition, unquenchably thirst for funding, and titillating a backstage drama. An aging ballerina named Beth, played in grandiose train-wreck fashion by Winona Ryder, is a brilliant dancer. She's temperamental and unpredictable. That's okay. She has aged a bit. That's not okay. The dance company director Thomas Loy, played with Mephistopheles charm and cunning by French actor Vincent Cassel, wants to do yet another production of Swan Lake. But this time he wants to strip it of its bloated sentimentality and strip it down to its bare essentials. Sure, he's full of hot air, but Cassel makes him and the project he's towing believable. Even interesting. He wants to cast a newer, a younger Swan, one that he can mold and control both on and off the stage. He sees something in Nena that every impresario in every backstage movie sees in his ingenue. Kid, you're going out there a chorus girl, but you're coming back a star. I apologize for lumping Bellries with Broadway hoovers, but the hoovers mark is where the Black Swan lands or drops itself with more feather than a point. Cassel trains not, but he also seduces her. The other dancers warn her that he's a creep. But Nena disregards them because Leroy is a genius. Or Nena, her impresarious artistry and high IQ trump his selfishness and lagging moral compass. She'll make a bargain with the devil to get the plum roll that only he can place within her reach. She's also a sad, fatherless child who seems to be in a desperate need of a paternal figure. Nena seems to have no friends inside or outside the corps. Another dancer, Lily, Monis, tries to befriend her, but only as a means of using her and stealing the part of the swan. Lily does little to conceal her intent, but Neneha nonetheless plays along. Lily takes her out for drinks the night before a performance, spikes Na's drink with a drug. Na sees her do it, sets her up with two unseemly guys whom she has sex with, and attempts to seduce Neneha herself. I found myself wondering if indeed Lily wouldn't have actually been a much better Black Swan. Tchaikovsky's Evil Bird has a sting to match its song. Nena has the song down, but she can't find the sting. Lily has it in spades. With an Nina-Lily relationship, Aronofsky has borrowed another ingenuous story from the Hollywood Files. The only about the ambitious unknown who waits in the wings and is ready to step on and over the star in order to become the new all-star. A tale told best in the Joseph Manet's 1950 film. All About Eve. Thea Black Swan does not hold up under the spotlight of that earlier classic. In All About Eve, the aging theater star Margot Channing, B. Davis, and the relentlessly ambitious rising one, Evia Harrington, and Baxter were equally matched in star power and star venom. Nena, on the other hand, is overshadowed by everyone around her. She can find an opening anywhere. Several reviewers have called Aronofsky's film a cross between even the 1948 British film The Red Shoes. Swan takes elements from both movies, but those elements don't gel. I thought I was watching a camp parody of those classics. The more Swan dragged on, the more I longed for the originals. The Red Shoes is still the quintessential movie about ballet. It's always a hard sell to get an audience to understand how a ballet dancer is able to give up everything, comfort, love, even life itself, for the sake of what appears to be an ethereal art, but the symbol of those seemingly innocent, inanimate scarlet slippers, taking on a life of their own, and taking over the life of their own puts and the glory and the danger of that dream into clear perspective. Victoria Page, Moira Shearer, the ballerina in the Red Shoes, lived and worked under the spell of an impresario, but she had her own life as well. She had fallen in love with a composer, and she had to decide between marriage and a career as a dancer. Nena is a young woman who seems to have nothing to live for when the curtain comes down. Her home is a small Upper West Side apartment that she shares with her single mother, a failed ballerina who smothers her daughter with a childlike affection and barely concealed hostility. Barbara Hershey plays the mother and she gives the best performance in the film. You can see in her face how pride and resentment go hand in hand and how she disdains her own eye for talent. The eye that lets her see that her daughter has the talent that she had always craved for herself. Natalie Portman is getting all the kudos for her performance as Nina. She deserves them. She gives a good performance and she dances quite well, but Hershey is the real actress. I can't put into words what makes a great performance, but I can point to Hershey's here and to those in several of her other films and say that's one. Aronofsky has saddled his film with a lot of psychological, you could also say a psycho baggage. Na's dilemmas are harder to figure out than a Rubik's Cube because you are never quite sure if something is really happening or if something is only an illusion that goes on inside Nena's unbalanced head. Neha has a life that exists between 2 points. The rehearsal room balance bar and her pink and white bedroom that is full of stuffed animals. Who wouldn't been erotic going back and forth between those two extremes on the New York City subway? No less. She imagines a lot of things and it gets harder and harder to distinguish between the real and the imagined. The plot is not rooted in anything that can grab you or make you feel for Nena, the way you could feel for Mickey Rourke's desperate but very real character in The Wrestler. Nena's transformation from baby doll to a temptress coincides with her move from the real world to a fantasy one. After a while, it's hard to distinguish only a world from the other, and ultimately, it's hard to feel anything for her. Does Nina really dance the Black Swan? Does she kill her rival? Does she wound herself when she goes on a rampage in her dressing room? Does the princess really drop her at the end of the first act? Whose fault was that? And what's the fallout? No heads rolling, I guess not. But at this point, my own head is rolling and reeling. I wonder if I'm going crazy, too. And that, I believe, is what Aronofsky has in mind. He doesn't want to just take us inside the characters' heads. He wants us to lie inside that head to feel the pain, do the drug, take the dive. I have never been one attracted to Natalie Portman much past her obvious physical beauty, with the exception of early turns in Thea Professional aka Alien and Beautiful Girls. Her performance style has always struck me as perfect to the point of being brittle, so Darren Aronofsky's use of her in Black Swan stands out as an astute bit of exploitation. Mining a Portman's own flaws to inform her role as an overambitious ballerina. Indeed, one could apply this to the entire ensemble cast of this thriller mashing up the ballet movie with the psychological horror film. Portman's ballerina is a rising ingenue given the role of the white and black swan in Swan Lake, but her director, Vincent Cassel, messin, Killer Instinct, is open about his doubts that she can pull it off. She is technically adept enough to pull off the role of the perfect white swan, yet lacks the passion which characterizes the darker Black Swan. This puts her in competition with new dancer Monis, the Book of Eli, whose enthusiasm is infectious in an almost literal sense. It turns out since Kunis joined the troupe, Portman catches glimpses of herself everywhere she goes, a double sometimes reflected even in Kunis' visage. Not the idea of a doppelganger representing a protagonist's break from reality and a sort of scapegoat to which she can attach all of her troubles recalls the Edgar Allan Poe story William Wilson and Lewis Mull's creepy 1969 adaptation of it for a segment in his Dorse Extraordinaires. On film, the icily handsome landowner plays the immoral Wilson and his identically named double, a conscientious man who seems to exist merely to push the evil Wilson's acts into the open. Just as Wilson blames his double for the scrapes he gets himself into, Portman's ingenue resists unleashing her repressed sexuality by imagining a dark twin which does it for her. The seductive Kunis seems to be the catalyst for the birth of this second persona, with pills and sex blurring the lines for Portman and allowing her to cast Kunis as her twisted alter ego. Portman even imagined as making love to herself during a steamy erotic encounter with Kunis, who quickly becomes an unwitting catch-all for Portman's repressed desires and resentments. Roman Polanski explored sexual repression as the cause of a personality schism in Repulsion, a 1965 comedy where he employed the chilly beauty of Catherine Deneuve as a distancing device, allowing the viewer to coldly witness her spiral downwards into insanity. In A Black Swan, Aronofsky alternately keeps us at arm's length from Portman and places us within her head, while she pirouettes her way through practice. Matthew whirls the camera exhilaratingly, sweeping us away and allowing us to experience the allure this painfully exacting art form holds for our heroine. Other times, we are allowed to see the obsession creeping into Portman's manic behavior as the physical and mental demands of her rise to stardom start manifesting themselves in bizarre scars on her back which hint at a history of cutting. One scene in which Portman enters the walk-up she shares with her mother Barbara Hershey only to find a room full of abstracted porters laughing at her is the most pointed evocation of Polanski's film, recalling the scene in which Deneuve is tormented by arms reaching out to hear from her own apartment's walls. It is perhaps the most famous ballet film of all, which serves as the greatest thematic influence to Black Swan. Its edgy take on one dancer's obsessive pursuit of perfection culminates in an impressionistic climax, which rivals the Red Shoes' emotional drama, if not in romantic tragedy, then at least in high-rung tension. In no near respect, I'm surprised to admit it even surpasses it. Powell and Presbygla's The Red Shoes reaches its emotional crescendo midway through the film during a Moira's 20th nightmarish dancey sequence, leaving the film's end to feel merely anguished. Black Swan hits its most suspenseful moment in its finale when Swan Lake is finally enacted. The effect is that of a catharsis which the viewer has sought through much of its anxiety-ridden story. leaving one breathless as the credits start to roll. When you've powered your way through 9 new movies within a week, it takes a lot to go back and sit through one of them again. There have now been 3. The others have been 127 hours and rare exports. A Christmas Tale. It took the batshit insanity of Darren Aronofsky's Black Swan to force me back to see if it was as good a second time around, and you end up loving the film even more upon revisiting it. Aronofsky has made a name for himself after his breakthrough at the 1998 Sundance Film Festival with a pie, thanks to his all-too-realistic depictions in Requiem for a Dream, which really put him on the map. And while his third feature outing, The Fountain, was considered a huge misstep, he brought her back his agony with a film of great intimacy and a few Oscar nods for its stars Mickey Rourke and Marissa Tomei. Copyright with the wrestler. While they have now been listed again after seeing him back in a deranged form with Black Swan, hopefully we see him nominated this year along with his superstar Natalie Portman. In all series, Portman has big dreams of becoming the new star for Thomas Leroy's Vincent, a Cassel reimagining of Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake. While many find Thomas's choice to kick off his new season, he expects to strip it down, make it visceral and real. At first, Thomas doesn't think Anna has the power to become the Black Swan by the end of the story. He is too well aware that she most definitely conveys the White Swan, at least, when the future rival Lily, Monis, arrives fresh off the plane from San Francisco. That's when Na has to do some soul-searching to figure out whether she has the guts to pull off the perfect performance and prove herself successor of the retiring Beth McIntyre, Winona Ryder. Natalie Portman sure has come a long way from the days of The Professional or Here cutesy turns in Anywhere But Here and Where the Heart Lies. She's thankfully broadening her horizons from playing the epileptic girl next door, Garden State, a stripper, Closer, a foul-mouthed rapper in the Saturday Night Live digital short, The Bruised Ex-Girlfriend, Hotel Shever, or shaving her head and kicking ass V for Vendetta. She's finally becoming the standout actress critics and fans alike have spotted since 1994. Now whether she's next seen in Here upcoming romantic, comedy No Strings Attached, a raunchy period comedy, Your Highness, or next summer's blockbuster Thor. It's nice to see she's keeping things varied and not taking any time off. We can all use more Portman in our cinematic diet, and it's of a particular note with Black Swan that she's bound to become one of Mr. Skin's most searched names, after the bedroom scene she shares, first with herself and then with Kunis after a drunken adult night out. Aronofsky fantastically blurs the lines between the film's reality and an increasingly perverse fantasy is all a part of the fun as events begin piling upon one another. Whether it's a didn't they hook up between Na and Lily or all the events of the Duma, everything is thrown into a pressure cooker, leaving the audience squirming to find out what's really going on. While Black Swan's ending might be quite similar to the wrestlers, that film ended a little too ambiguously and left me with a bad aftertaste and a shrug of the shoulders. Here, screenwriters Mark Heyman, Andressa Hines, and John James Cloflin have given a fitful ending where everything finally adds up to the sum of its parts, and it's finally realized that what Thomas says about his version of Swan Lake is what everyone involved has decided to do with the film, and that is worthy of a standing ovation all in itself. Directed by Darren Aronofsky, the same man who gave us The Wrestler and Requiem for a Dream, Black Swan is a passionate, tension-filled suspense drama about a ballerina named Natalie Portman, who is chosen to play the much-coveted lead in New York Ballet Company's production, Swan Lake. The role calls for not just a perfect portrayal of the innocent white swan, but also the much more difficult Black Swan. Although Winona performs the White Swan the part faultlessly, she needs more time to perfect the more demanding role, the Black Swan. But as she struggled to get lost in this dark character and receive unsolicited help from the sexually charged Lily, Monis, she discovers more about her own dark side. Without a doubt, Natalie Portman nailed the role Leah as if the film was made so she could have her first Academy Award. She was as convincing as the innocent Nina, wanting to meet her mother's expectations and proving she deserved the part. She was also able to successfully transition to the rebellious woman who would do everything to keep the role. But of course, the film is not all about Natalie Portman. Darren Aronofsky was able to build the attention in a way that it will never let you go minutes into the film. The momentum breaks her toenail after an emotionally painful pirouette. The heaviness of the film shoots up and there's no coming down. It was actually a little difficult to watch because you will get to feel for every character and you also get confused as to what is real and what is not. The film also succeeds in pouring sensuality and passion all over the film. It is intriguing, addictive, sexy. Not that I enjoyed the hot lesbian action in it, but it was well shot. Some elements are cliché, such as the overwhelming pink in Nina's room. It was like spoon-feeding me that Nina likes pink and is therefore the innocent type. Even the mirror scenes, symbolic as they are, kind of feel redundant. Black Swan is an effective thriller. Nevertheless, it would also be interesting to see how it would turn out had Aronofsky steered away from a psychological suspense and instead make it a subtle psychological drama. The relationship between Nina and her mother demands more screen time. Their chemistry is phenomenal and their scenes together are much more intense than the whole stage and backstage sequence towards the end of the film. Regardless of what it could have been, A Black Swan is a fine film as is. The film draws the audience into the paranoid, obsessed psyche of a ballerina who has a lot to prove to everyone and to herself, and whether the character successfully becomes the Black Swan or not, Natalie Portman has just become the actress to beat with her performance in this film. When awards season rolls around and even for months beforehand, we're subjected to a lot of hyperbole where every picture is breathtakingly touted as best of the year and every performance is called Oscar-worthy. More often than not, this is a lot of hogwash, but sometimes it turns out a particular piece of work has worthy to the buzz. One such example is Natalie Portman's portrayal of a ballerina whose sanity slowly unravels in Darren Aronofsky's Black Swan, opening a Friday, December 3. Nina Portman gets the coveted lead role in a NYC Ballet Company's production of Swan Lake. To pressure from director Vincent Cassel, who expresses doubts about her ability to play both the white and black swans. Plus, the presence of a young passionate dancer, Kunis, who seems to know a little, if not all, about Evia causes Nina to become paranoid about it being replaced. She goes to extremes to keep the part, to make herself perfect, though she's really descending into a madness. Portman has done edgy and dark before, but has never been this effective. When she shaved her head for V for Vendetta, it seemed like a stunt, a too jarring attempt to break away from her nice girl image, and the result was unconvincing. But it's completely believable for the actress to inhabit Nina with her natural grace though much thinner than the usual body and swan-like neck. Eerie pro-level dancing Portman did much of Ida herself seals the deal. But then, just as the swan splits into two selves, Portman shows us that the sweet pretty exterior is just a cover-up for Na's disturbing inner core. Sure, staying in not up in the cutthroat world of professional ballet must be stressful, but Nina goes over the edge and Portman makes her mental deterioration terrifying. Na's instability makes the movie quite suspenseful at times, for we never know what she'll do or how far she'll go. She can have wild sex one minute and fly into a rage the next. She can be joyful and fall apart at the same time. Much has been said about Annette Bening's the performance and The Kids Are Alright and how it's her time to finally win an Oscar, but I think Portman's work is much more complex. I haven't seen a Michelle Williams in Blue Valentine yet. We'll do so tonight, but I've seen all of the other contenders and think Portman deserves the Best Actress gold this year. Kunis, who seems to only get more captivating the older she gets, keeps USA guessing as Lily, Nina's competitor. Her friendliness and steady gaze give you nothing away about her true motives. Sometimes it's harder and more interesting to hide something in a performance than to show too much, and Kunis does the former. Keeping the conflict in play throughout the film, Barbara Hershey, playing Nena's mother, who is a former ballerina, manages to make Mom sympathetic, as Hershey said in the Q session I attended, more unforgettable. She's not a mother from hell, but a mother in hell. One mentally ill person taking care of another mentally ill person. Aronofsky can get a little carried away with imagery in his movies, but here the weirdness works because he sees things that aren't rooted in the reality. And the way he shoots the ballet is thrilling and visceral, capturing the pain and sweat and blood of it all along with the beauty. Finally, a movie that depicts how women in a competitive environment actually feel about each other. At least I think Black Swan is a spellbinding psychological thriller, a genre whose entrants have been sparse in recent history, working with a fantastic cast and a first-rate script. Director Darren Aronofsky has crafted a superior film about a topic that shouldn't be all that scary, ballet. The toll both mentally and physically that the profession takes on its employees, however, is a different story. Veteran ballerina Natalie Portman lives and breathes hero work, and it has paid off. The director of her company's performance of Swan Lake, Thomas Cassel, has selected Nena to replace primal ballerina Beth Ryder, also the Swan Queen. Na's mother Hershey, a former ballerina who lives vicariously through her accomplishments, couldn't be happier. Things take a dark turn when Lily, a hotshot dancer from San Francisco, arrives on the scene and begins to impress Thomas. Na sees her as a direct threat to her part and soon begins a downward mental spiral of recklessness and paranoia. Aronofsky establishes a sense of dread from the outset. Every scene drips with uncertainty and indiscriminate motives. Is Nena truly losing her mind? Is everyone out to get her? Is it all a dream? The screenplay provides no easy answers, but spawns plenty of theories. Aronofsky delivers the shocks we were least expecting, especially in the form of body horror and bizarre sexual fantasies. The latter third of the film is almost unbearably intense, culminating in a finale that is sure to have opinions flying on the way out of the theater. With this performance, Natalie Portman has established herself as one of the premier actresses working today, ruling in all respects. Portman creates a character that is endlessly paranoid, terrified, and looking for a way out of her introverted shell. Kunis is similarly effective, also is she evil. Lily, naturally beautiful and confident, she excels at personifying the freewheeling polar opposite of Nena. Vincent, Cassel and Barbara Hershey provide excellent supporting performances, as does an ultra-creepy Winona Ryder as a former dancer who is losing it. Black Swan is a true suspense experience, and it's a welcome one. We too often settle for the status quo in horror. Black Swan puts the story first and builds the suspense and horror around it. This is one of Aronofsky's most accomplished works and easily his most accessible film to date. With this film and The Wrestler, he has become the master of telling engaging stories about the people who are willing to put their bodies on the line for our entertainment. This is a masterful piece of work and one of the best films of 2010. Never in my right mind would I have thought to watch a film about ballet dancers. Admittedly, I'm not sophisticated enough to partake in any sort of classical theater, though I did listen to a bit of the Nutcracker on my nose titled Upward with Class. After seeing Darren Aronofsky's Black Swan, my world has obviously changed. So, it is time for me to bring out my munl, spot myself a glass of fine wine, and commence my review for the film that combines the mind-bending thrills of Requiem for a Dream and the tale of self-discovery that was present in Aronofsky's last film, The Wrestler, which confidentially serves an innocent side dish to what is sure to become a worldwide phenomena, offering a glimpse into the director's own dark fantasy. Sears Natalie Portman is an immensely dedicated, evident in her bulimia and bloody yet incredibly flexible feet which stem from hours upon hours of practice on a daily basis, albeit troubled ballet dancer, and incarnate of goodness. She is, however, in order to land the central spot in a Playboy director Thomas Leroy's Vincent a Cassel new season of Swan Lake, a show that promises to retell the classica through a modern lens, which is all in attempt to win back audiences who yearn for something fresh. But although Nana has been repressed to the point of retaining a childlike innocence and a naivete, namely by her psychotic mother, Erica, Barbara Hershey, and an ex-dancer who lives her life through her daughter, her much-wanted role as the Swan Queen creates animosity amongst her fellow dancers. One such rivalry chronicled throughout most of Black Swan involves Lily, Monis, a fresh face whose cunning and seductive mannerisms make her a formidably counterpart to Nina. Of course, Lily is symbolic of the Black Swan, a concept that is foreign to Nina, who is in fact a child stuck in an adult's body. This is made evident through one pivotal scene, in which Nina, who has become increasingly indulgent in her dark side, throws away all of the stuffed animals that would formally decorate her smaller room, which doesn't even have a lock. Lily uses her arsenal of sex, drugs, and manipulation to reign supreme in Nina's work and personal life, even going so far as to making advances towards Loy, who admittedly is scum, but who Nina adores for his own batch of sexuality. But in this Freudian nightmare, color is almost as important as the characters that inhabit this world. There is a sharp contrast between black and white and Aronofsky's latest. The most explicit example is in the costume design. Nina wears white/light colors whereas Lily adorns darker tones. Although one small scene that a majority of audience members have missed has Winona Ryder's character Beth McIntyre, the former Swan Queen aka the Dying Queen, hospitalized following a near-fatal incident. In the key yet seemingly unimportant scene, the lighting, usually a forgotten, albeit extremely important part of filmmaking, had been deliberately set so that only a half of her face is covered in shadow. The imagery creating the image of a two-sided queen, channels both the white and the black swan, which has led to her destruction, foreshadows Na's destiny, mixed in with equally suitable and a terrific set designing. This centralized color scheme becomes Black Swan's key atmospheric element. I believe, however, that it is mandatory to specify that a leading actress, Natalie Portman, has reportedly drained for up to a year prior to shooting Black Swan. This shows an immense and commendable respect for her craft, which is further reinforced in her brilliant performance. She transforms herself for the role, being nearly unrecognizable, the Portman that most casual moviegoers don't know. That being said, her dancing is electrifying, channeling the very spirit of ballet itself, perhaps even channeling her inner Oscar winner, which this performance has a fairly good chance of bringing. However, that wasn't meant to understate the brilliance of the performances by Kunis, who utterly surprised me, Hershey, who shocked me, and Cassel, who backed up my claim that he is one of the best names in modern cinema. All three are perfect in their own right, exhibiting emotions left and right and remaining unmistakably believable. Though I admit to having a bit of bias here, as I'm still mesmerized by Cassel's work in Messin, A Killer Instinct and Messin Public Enemy #1. To see him in an Americana film was simply mind-blowing, but you don't expect the same reaction from other people. But I'm a dry-hearted fan. Now, as much as I enjoyed Black Swan, nothing is perfect. Mark Heyman, Andre Hines, and John J. McLaughlin's script does have beautiful and organic and almost poetic dialogue. But the film does have its moments where it feels oversaturated and some superfluous bloated devices could have been scrapped. In addition, some minor side characters were a bit underdeveloped, regardless of its flaws, none of which are necessarily damning. Black Swan marks an important chapter in director Darren Aronofsky's career. His direction, which reminded me of Stanley Kubrick's trademark technique, a compliment no doubt, alongside a beautiful score, which consists of some of Swan Lake's most famous tunes, tee the film up very nicely. making it a true Herculean masterpiece. Black Swan is macabre indulgent crap, although exquisitely crafted. It's ultimately a waste of 2 hours. Director Darren Aronofsky's touch ice is so heavy-handed and blunt in his tale of fast-spiraling meltdown. Natalie Portman is so powerful as Nina and will win an Oscar. Black Swan is classic tragedy but lacks eloquence and resonance. Paradoxically, Aronofsky's sledgehammer-like narrative overwhelms the elusive grace and refinement of ballet. I admire Aronofsky's Thea Wrestler, also a tale of deceptive physicality and discipline. However, something is amok here. Even as literal metaphor of Swan Lake, Black Swan morphs as a very unpleasant experience. Portman's Nina hauntingly says, "You just want to be perfect." This echoes throughout his tortured obsession. This idea from the magnificent prowess of dance. At a screenplay by Mark Heyman, Andressa Hines, and John Clofel in his unrelenting waves of corporeal rage and suffering. The handheld camera shots in Black Swan give it a gritty and austere feel. Natalie Portman trained nearly 2 years to prepare for the role of Nina Sears. Her protruding ribs and her breast area scary authenticity. Her gaunt persona captures the rigid and wounded spirit of Nina, who is an impeccable technician but fearful for risking the freedom of her art. As the story unfolds, perhaps her instincts were warranted. Portman is riveting and nuanced. She enrolls us into Nina's life despite Aronofsky's opaque narrative strokes. Nina suffers blistering nerve rashes and mangled toes. Nina is the dedicated ballerina who is finally called to audition for the role of the Swan Queen in Swan Lake. Director Thomas, darkly charming Vincent Cassel, knows that Nina can embody the white swan, but questions whether she can summon the dark fire of the Black Swan. Thomas replaces his aging lover Premia ballerina Beth Hughes and tragic Winona Ryder in his envisioning of Swan Lake. Nina is aware that she may be auditioning for more than just the lead. Her obsessive stage mom Erica dramatically taught Barbara Hershey also fears the inevitable. Erica is eerily controlling and as a former dancer proxies her life for her daughter Nina. Here, Aronofsky brilliantly exposes Nina as one who forsakes greatness for a perfection. However, I think he forfeits this thread in the catharsis. Enter Kunis Lily, the Black Swan of the tale. Lily is the talented, untamed dancer, willing to risk all in life and in dance. Lily lacks the precision of Nina, but possesses unbridled passion and sensuality. Lily and Nina are logical rivals and lyrical yin and yang of the same person. If you are a fan of YouTube, you are aware of their erratic sapphic thrust. It is captivating. However, like much of Black Swan, this occurs as manipulation on the part of the director. The concluding arc of Black Swan lost me halfway through. We get that Na is battling for her own sanity. To that end, Portman is amazing and displays a poignant suffering and muted joy. The performances are grand. Cassel is creepy duplicity. Kunis is awesome as the maverick dancer living on the ish. I think Black Swan fails despite great effort in exposing the perfection myth. Yes, perfection is manifested in youth, beauty, and talent. There is perfection in icons like James Dean and Bruce Lee. The tragedy of these icons was that the possibility of greatness was forsaken too soon. Black Swan celebrates the pursuit of perfection, not the legacy of greatness of altering and inspiring the world. Perfection is misguided and a fleeting pursuit. Greatness is the game worth playing and living. Black Swan seems to miss this distinction, and that is a little sad since the crushing flop that the fountain has been. Come on, how many of you even remembered it? Darren Aronofsky has become a born-again author. By that, I mean that he left behind his MTV-laced, heavy on editing, a fast-paced directing style for something more simple, more visceral. Camera and a shoulder. Lots of close ups, tight and packed up frames, etc. At first, I missed the demented Minda that put Requiem for a Dream into images with a terrifying success. His new style works a lot better for a Black Swan than it did for The Wrestler in 2008. Or was it just flat out a better film? Maybe it was Natalie Portman's strong interpretation or Vincent Cassel's eternal bad guy routine, but I thought A Black Swan was Darren Aronofsky's best movie since Requiem for a Dream. The subject is already a lot more gripping than a beat-up wrestler trying to squeeze out a few dollars. Nina Sears Portman is a ballerina in a dance company who is opening its season with a barrow interpretation of Swan Lake. The choreographer Thomas Cassel wants to put some emotion, a fresh vision into the classic. For this, he selects Nina, the most technical yet the coldest dancer of the company, and takes on himself to try to corrupt her and put her in the right state of mind to play the Black Swan, which is an evil part. Since the White Owl and the Black Swan are twins, they needed to be played by the same dancer. Only a problem? Nena is psychologically fragile. She grew up with a singly abusive mother in an unhealthy environment, so any kind of tremor will send her spiraling down into madness. And as usual, Vincent Cassel doesn't help. He gets Lily Kunis, a sexually liberal, for lack of a better term, to work on Nena's case. Like I previously said, Aronofsky's newfound style helps carrying the intensity of his point. The introverted Nina has a flourishing inner world that turns into weirdly convincing daydreaming to straight-up hallucinations. And I'm not talking about the common Hollywood cliché hallucination. Thea converse about the hermeneutic sub-branch writers with you kind, but rather the realistic split-second moment of terror. One, the intimacy and the claustrophobia of the close-ups, the tight frames and the soundtrack are well adjusted to Na's fragile psyche. I think that what got me the most was the gradual use of Swan Lake's score to symbolize Nena's symbiosis with the Black Swan. As her actions get more radical and her hallucinations get to be more overbearing, she heard the soundtrack of the ballet louder and louder. And that, my friends, is the essence of real insanity. The loss of differentiation either between the reality and the image. I am not sure I have seen a director capture this as well as Aronofsky did. Madness first lies in the detail, then in the absolute, and Black Swan is right about that. I don't think there's anything I disliked about the movie. Barbara Hershey was a bit shoddy by times, but she has a very secondary role. The presence of Winona Ryder's character is also kind of useless to the story, but I suspect she was put there by Aronofsky as an attempt of total faithfulness to the original text. There is also that weird burger reading scene that I didn't get. Black Swan's flaws are so small and the intensity grows so high that you will forget about them and finish the movie mesmerized, completely oblivious to any sort of cracks in that monumental work. Some people might be startled by the ballet part of the movie, but it's minor. It serves the purpose of showing Na's descent into madness. Black Swan has been built as a thriller, drama, but it's also a tragedy in the classical sense of the term. It's a very good example of reappropriating and redeploying a timeless dramatic structure to present a new era of our viewers. This should have got the Best Movie Oscar because it's spectacular, because it's difficult, and because it lives up to the challenge. Impulsion, Suspiria, Shine, The Piano Teacher. These were 4 movies Black Swan made me think of without effort. Others have brought up Persona and Mulholland Drive. They work too. It doesn't really matter which movies people bring up in connection with Darren Aronofsky's movie. The bottom line is they're all likely to be superior than this derivative mess. Imagine if Brian Gunn, instead of cutting up newspapers to compose poems, cut up famous films to make a new one. What call it Brian Gunn's Black Swan. Natalie Portman plays Nina, a repressed ballet dancer with low self-esteem, dominated by her mother, Barbara Hershey, a former dancer who gave up her career to have Nina and who experiences glory through her daughter's success. And success arrives when Thomas Leroy, Vincent Cassel, Nina's company director, offers her the roles of the White Swan, Black Swan in Aronofsky's Swan Lake. But Nina, the meek virginal damsel, will have to get in touch with her dark side in order to play the role of the sensual, dangerous Black Swan. Will Nina succeed, or will the overwhelming pressure push her over the edge? That's really a rhetorical question because the film offers very little suspense. Nina is emotionally unstable from the very beginning, from the opening scenes. She is already trapped in hallucinations and losing her grip on reality. The film never clearly explains why Thomas Leroy, who has never witnessed Nina's darker side, is so convinced she can convincingly perform both the innocent white swan and the seductive black swan. Apparently, he simply has faith in her potential. To unlock that potential, however, he resorts to manipulative and inappropriate behavior or is sexually harassing her, humiliating her in front of others, and even suggesting she masturbate to live a little. Vincent Cassel is easily one of the film's highlights. As the provocative and manipulative Thomas, he creates a fascinating contrast to Natalie Portman's fragile Nina, charming, arrogant, seductive, and ruthless. Thomas is willing to destroy Nina emotionally if it results in a perfect performance. Cassel delivers arguably the strongest performance in the film. The rest of the cast leaves a more modest impression. Barbara Hershey and Winona Ryder, who plays an aging ballerina forced into retirement to make room for Nina, give capable performances despite having limited material to work with. Natalie Portman, eager to showcase her dramatic abilities, alternates between emotional intensity and moments that feel overly theatrical. Rather than watching a truly transformative performance, it often feels as though a talented actress is struggling with an underdeveloped character. Nina is meant to be a deeply complex and tortured ballet dancer, but the screenplay rarely gives her the depth needed to fully support that idea. The story repeatedly emphasizes that Nina must completely change her dancing style to embody the Black Swan. She is told to become seductive, spontaneous, and uninhibited. The audience is led to expect that her final performance will be a breathtaking, transcendent moment earned through immense sacrifice, yet when the climactic performance arrives, it looks much like every other performance we've already seen. The audience erupts into applause. Thomas praises her achievement, but visually and dramatically, very little has changed. Although the screenplay is divisive, the technical aspects of the film are considerably stronger. The cinematography and editing are polished and effective, while Darren Aronofsky incorporates imaginative horror elements that vividly portray Nina's psychological breakdown. Mirror reflections move independently, faces appear on strangers, and disturbing visual distortions blur the line between reality and imagination. These moments effectively communicate Nina's growing paranoia, her fear that Lily, played by Mila Kunis, is trying to steal the lead role becomes increasingly believable, even though Lily herself does very little to justify Nina's suspicions. The brilliance lies in the fact that Lily functions more as a projection of Nina's insecurities than as an actual antagonist. Not every visual effect is equally successful, however. The climactic transformation into the Black Swan appears noticeably artificial, lacking the convincing practical impact achieved by classic horror directors such as David Cronenberg or John Carpenter decades earlier. The film also relies heavily on simplistic visual symbolism. Nina is dressed in white to represent innocence, while Lily consistently wears black, even sporting black wing tattoos. As Nina embraces her darker side, her wardrobe gradually becomes darker as well. The symbolism is so obvious that it sometimes feels repetitive. Overall, Black Swan can feel as psychologically unstable as its protagonist. Its exploration of obsession, perfectionism, and artistic sacrifice often leans heavily on familiar psychological cliché copyright-s and melodrama. At times, it reaches for the grandeur of Swan Lake but falls short of its ambitions. One element that unquestionably stands out is Piotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky's timeless score from Swan Lake. For some viewers, it far outshines Clint Mansell's original compositions, creating an unavoidable comparison between classical and contemporary film music. Even so, Black Swan remains one of the most distinctive films of its era. It is a beautifully crafted psychological thriller that combines haunting imagery, unsettling atmosphere, and bold filmmaking with a compelling central performance from Natalie Portman and Darren Aronofsky's fearless direction. The film follows Nina, an exceptionally gifted young ballerina who lands the lead role in a bold new production of Swan Lake. Although the premise is straightforward, the execution transforms it into an emotionally intense psychological journey. Natalie Portman delivers one of the strongest performances of her career. She captures Nina's precision, discipline, and vulnerability with remarkable control. As the story progresses, her calm exterior slowly crumbles, allowing the Black Swan to emerge naturally through subtle changes in posture, movement, and emotion. Aronofsky's energetic and immersive directing places viewers directly inside the fiercely competitive world of professional ballet. His bold visual style gives the film a dreamlike quality where fantasy and reality become increasingly impossible to separate. The film is both visually striking and psychologically engaging. It embraces melodrama while remaining committed to its artistic ambitions, leaving audiences with lingering questions long after the credits roll. While many viewers will interpret its themes differently, its central ideas are surprisingly accessible beneath the surreal imagery. The supporting cast is equally effective. Vincent Cassel delivers a memorable performance as Thomas Leroy, carefully balancing charisma and manipulation without overshadowing the film's leading actresses. Mila Kunis also contributes a subtle performance that complements the story's psychological ambiguity. Black Swan is not an easy film to recommend. Its disturbing imagery, intense psychological themes, and deliberate ambiguity make it challenging viewing. However, for those willing to engage with its symbolism and emotional complexity, it offers a rewarding cinematic experience. Whether audiences admire or criticize it, few can deny its craftsmanship, Portman's remarkable performance, or Aronofsky's confident direction, which firmly established him among the leading American filmmakers of his generation. Film information. A Sense Director: Darren Aronofsky. A Sense Screenplay: Mark Heyman. A Sense Story: Andres Hines. A Sense Producer: Mike Medavoy. A Sense Starring: Natalie Portman. A Sense Cinematography: Matthew Libatique. A Sense Editor: Andrew Blum. A Sense Music: Clint Mansell. A Sense Production Company: Cross Creek Pictures. A Sense Distributor: Ox Searchlight Pictures. A Sense Release Date: September 1, 2010. Premiere: A Sense Running Time: 108 minutes. A Sense Country: United States. A Sense Language: English. A Sense Budget: $13 million. A Sense Worldwide Box Office: $332.1 million.